Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed experts and fellow participants, I would love to extend a very warm welcome to you all and to the Global Inclusive Education Virtual Summer Camp 2023. I am truly honored to be here with you as we embark on this extremely informative journey together. This much needed platform is proudly powered by the Cadet Academy in partnership with 𝘼𝙧𝙀𝙍 Learning and under the theme of Understanding Learning Disabilities in Cultural Context. Now, today we are here with a shared purpose, and that is to delve into the world of inclusive education and into the realm of learning disabilities from a cultural perspective. Now, the objective of the summer camp are truly profound. This platform is to cultivate a dynamic learning experience. We're here to foster meaningful networking opportunities, as well as to share practical insights, tools, and strategies. Now, this is also for parents across Africa, to help them with the support that they need to champion their cause of special needs. I am personally deeply committed to this cause. And I believe that every step that we take towards inclusive education is a step towards a brighter, happier future for everyone. I believe it is our collective dedication that drives us forward, and I am incredibly excited to see the impact that we will continue to make after today and in the coming years. So we're privileged to have an exceptional lineup of speakers and panelists who will share their expertise and insights with us. Our session is going to go from about now till 4:20 p.m. That's West African time, followed by our final session from 4:20 until 6 p.m. West African time. I sincerely and kindly urge each speaker to adhere to your allotted time, please, ensuring that we remain on schedule and conclude our day's discussion at a reasonable hour. And I encourage all participants to please share your thoughts, your questions, your experiences, and let's actually contribute to the discoveries to this whole discourse by using the hashtag Global Inclusive Education Summer Camp 2023 and hashtag GIEVSC 2023. That's the acronym, the abbreviated version. So, without further ado, let us transition to our first session. I'm delighted to pass the virtual baton on to our esteemed moderator, 𝘼𝙒𝙼𝙀𝙀𝙀𝙀, who will gracefully guide us through the opening remarks and set the stage for an enriching day of exploration and dialogue. I'm Susan Ilian. It is my honor to serve you as your MC today. Thank you for joining us. Let's get this journey started. 𝘼𝙒.
Thank you so very much, Susie. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's such a beautiful Saturday, and I'm excited to be here with us all. So real quick, because we have quite a number of things to cover today, I'll just go straight to my opening remark so that I don't speak too much. I've written it out, so please listen carefully. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed educators and honored guests, a very warm welcome to the 5th Global Inclusive Education Virtual Summer Camp and Teachers Award, proudly hosted by the Cadet Academy in partnership with 𝘼𝙧𝙀𝙀𝙀𝙀 Learning. I'm deeply honored to sit before you today as your host for this momentous event. And I sincerely appreciate my dear friend Tiffany James, the Vice President of 𝘼𝙧𝙀𝙀𝙀𝙀 Learning, and for our continued support. The Cadet Academy has always been a beacon of inclusive education in Nigeria and beyond, championing the cause of diverse learning needs. Today, we gather here not only to celebrate our shared commitment to inclusive education, but also to recognize the remarkable teachers and parents who have dedicated their hearts and souls to making a difference in the lives of students with diverse abilities. The theme of today's conference is Understanding Learning Disabilities in Cultural Context. This strikes at the heart of our mission here at the Cadet Academy. It reminds us that true inclusivity is not merely a matter of accommodating differences, but of celebrating and cherishing them. In our journey to create inclusive learning environments, it's imperative that we recognize and respect diverse cultural contexts within which learning disabilities are experienced. Today, we embark on a quest for deeper understanding, one that will empower us to provide education that is not only equitable, but also truly inclusive. Nestle Learning's unwavering support has made this gathering possible, allowing us to explore, discuss, and evolve our understanding of inclusive education. Throughout today's conference, we'll engage in insightful discussion, explore innovative strategies, and celebrate the outstanding contribution of parents and educators who have transformed the lives of their children and other students. So let us embark on this journey of knowledge, compassion, and celebration with the collective goal of fostering an inclusive world, one classroom at a time. Thank you for being a part of the 5th Global Inclusive Education Virtual Summer Camp and Teachers Awards 2023. And let the day ahead be filled with inspiration and learning. Thank you all. So, Susie, do I have your permission to go ahead? I think I did hear you say that. Real quick, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Dr. Brenda Barrio. I'll read her bio real quick if I bring her up. Dr. Brenda Barrio is an associate professor of special education, critical perspective at the University of North Texas. Her research focuses on the areas of disproportionality of culturally and linguistically diverse students in special education, cultural responsive teaching, bilingual special education, and pre-in-service teacher preparation. Dr. Barrio has over 20 years of teaching experience, including graduate and undergraduate special education courses and K-5 bilingual and inclusive education. She's also the co-founder of the UNT ELIVA and WSU ROA, inclusive post-secondary education program for young adults and with intellectual and or developmental disabilities, and is the current president of the Council for Learning Disabilities. Also serves as the UNT Division of Research and Innovation Faculty Fellow. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome with me, Dr. Brenda Barrio.
Thank you so much, Lola, for having me here today. And thank you for the Cadet Academy and Nessie for sponsoring this wonderful event. I'm going to share my screen now to get us started. If everybody can see my screen. Wonderful. Thank you so much again. As Lola said, I'm an associate professor of special education at the University of North Texas. I've had the privilege of being in this role for 4 years, but I've been teaching at the university for over 10 years. Today's presentation is titled Engaging Post-Secondary Education Students with Learning Disabilities through Technology in Diverse Cultural Context. To get us started, I want to provide a quick overview where I start with the foundation of providing a cultural historical framework and diving into culturally responsiveness, universal design for learning practices, and some practical examples, not only for educators, but for anybody that is supporting students with learning disabilities or students themselves as well. We'll dive also into designing and evaluating plans. And what I think is most important is having a call of action to be agents of change, not only in our work environments, but also within our society. So I'll provide some next steps and we'll wrap up with Q&A. So to start off, I like to share a little bit more of a foundational framework, which is the cultural historical framework by 𝘼𝙒𝙼𝙍. From many years, we've known that disabilities are often viewed as from a very deficit perspective. This means that they're often viewed as something negative or something that perhaps is not it's not the best. And if everybody mind just muting their microphones, that would be great. Thank you so much. So from this perspective, the framework itself is letting us remember that not only history, but also our culture within society, different cultures, may need to reframe the way we view disabilities or learning disabilities in general. So for example, really taking into consideration cultural practices. Again, from a societal perspective and a historical perspective, we viewed disability from a deficit point of view. And this framework is encouraging us to reframe the way we view disabilities from a strengths-based perspective. So looking at it from the human diversity and how we all bring strengths and something to the table that is positive. Not everything is negative that we currently have. Also, looking at it from an enriching and diverse perspective, we often view disability as a color evasive lens, or all the research that we do within that. This means that we try to view it as neutral, like there's no differences in cultures. And so this framework is reminding us that there are differences in cultures. There's differences in not only our practices, but the way we treat people and the way we support people with disabilities from diverse cultural backgrounds. Again, stressing this historical and the positionality practices, how we've gone from a medical model of disability, so looking at what's wrong or what is missing or not there, to more of this is a person and this is part of their identity and this is part of who they are. So let's look at it from a what are their strengths? And yes, they might have needs, but let's make sure that the strengths are pushed forward and not really think about it from a more deficit perspective. It's also, the framework also asks us to examine the role of power in our own activities, from teachers having power in their classroom to professors or administrators, to also having a great impact in individuals with disabilities' lives, right? So making sure that we reflect on this role of power and making sure that we move forward. Also looking at it from the micro and macro analyses, so not only from the societal and cultural perspective, but also within our own practices, our own individual daily practices. Are we doing things that are supporting individuals with disabilities, that take into consideration individuals with disabilities? Or is it that we are, perhaps hindering some of those opportunities for them? There's also a lot on the intersection between race, ethnicity, and educational context. There's, from a colonized perspective, there's some spaces where segregation had been part of this, not only for individuals with disabilities within education settings, but also people from diverse cultural and ethnic backgrounds. And one that's most important is that research and evidence-based practices are often focusing on wide populations. So we also have to rethink as researchers and the practices that we put in as educators, that many of these practices may not be normed or may not be, researched within our own cultures or our own populations. So this is just, again, something for you all to think about as we continue today's conversation. I also want to give guiding principles about this keynote and really think about it from a multiple perspective approach. Not all of us are going to think the same way. We're not all going to be on the same page, but it is important that we not only respect our different perspectives, but also recognize our own biases and allow others to be heard. So listening is extremely important. Creating those supporting environments is very important as well. Also, there's sometimes going to be some controversial issues. So not just here, but beyond today's global education webinar. I think it's very important for us to think about it and encouraging how to be proactive. And again, we'll get to that when I talked about the agents of change. And also recognize that culture is very dynamic and we're always changing. There's so many new opportunities for us to have global conversations like we're having today that perhaps we haven't had in the past. But it is important that we all take responsibility for that change and that we think about it again from a very strengths-based perspective where we can move not only the field forward, but also the supports that individuals with learning disabilities have. So with that said, here are some more of the practical things for us to think about as we are thinking about it from all these educational supports and services for individuals with learning disabilities from a cultural responsiveness perspective. It is very important for us as educators, but also as service providers or even family members to really include the students' background and experiences in everything that we do. Not only getting to know our students with disabilities in a deeper manner, but also bringing the richness that they have, not only from their culture, but also their backgrounds, bringing in their families, educational experiences, and experiences in general to the table. And how do we merge that within our educational context? Sometimes it's as simple as asking, how their weekend was, if they did anything that they enjoyed, all the way to things about learning about their traditions and celebrations. As I was sharing earlier, when we're thinking about the students and students with disabilities in general, we often think about it as the student's disability only. But we know that every human being has many different identities and many different intersectionalities. So I invite you to really think about the student as a whole, and what they bring to the classroom and also to everyday society from their different identities. So it could be race, gender, culture, language, social, economic status, and so on and so forth. One of the things that I think is very important also to think about is that if the student speaks more than one language, it's something that now research is very much showing that it's part of the cognitive function that is increased, and it's something that's very positive. So even though they might have a learning disability, or even though they might have a disability in general, having that background of multilingualism or bilingualism is something that we should be celebrating and taking advantage as a strength for them as well. For our own purposes, it's very important for us to think about how we assess and evaluate students with learning disabilities or any disability from a wide range of instruction and assessment. So not only including different instructional methods like universal design for learning and culturally responsive practices, but it's also important not to only use one type of assessment, that we use a wide range of assessments that not only are they normed perhaps in certain countries, but there's also a lot of qualitative pieces that we can really make sure that we bring to that conversation. And then what I think is most important is that cultural reciprocity, that we should really think about our own culture. So doing a lot of internal reflection about my own culture. I'm originally from Mexico, for example, but I've lived in the United States for over 25 years. So my culture is ever changing, especially if I go and teach. Not only sometimes I teach in other countries like Ecuador. And so really thinking about, not only am I sharing my culture and I'm sharing my traditions and my understanding of perhaps what disability is, but also I need to be mindful about what others are sharing with me from their own culture and their own understanding. So it is extremely important that we have this reflexive practice to make sure that this is a two-way, and sometimes more than a two-way, part of the conversation and part of what we are doing in general to enrich the students' lives. This is more of a practical perspective as well, from culturally responsive practices and teaching specifically. We often get stuck on this awareness piece where we're recognizing diversity, we're recognizing the culture of our students, but we need to move beyond that, right? So a lot of it is learning from others, and learning not only from our students, but learning from their families, learning from their communities. And it is very important to cultivate those relationships in order for us to know the students better. As I mentioned, with a student with a learning disability, for example, their intersectionality may be that there's their disability, but there's also their culture, there's also their race, there's language, there's their background, where they came from, all these things that make them who they are. And so it is important that we learn all those aspects from that perspective in order to serve them better. Also very important is that we not only learn from them, but also that we learn from each other as educators, that we share this information with others, that we share how we obtain this information as well. And not only from the pedagogical perspective, but also how do we engage, with families and students and communities, because oftentimes educators may not have those practices, or they might not think that those practices will be helpful, but research shows that there is extremely helpful, right? And then again, the information processing. So being able to process all this information and reflect on it, and then do it all over again, right? And how are we putting all of this information into practice? How am I using it to inform my assessments? Which assessments am I using? How is it that I am informing my teaching? How is it that I'm informing the plans that I'm building for my students, and integrating my students in general? So as we're shifting more into this post-secondary education, this is more of a global, right? But I wanted to make sure that I also include what are some considerations as I'm looking at students with learning disabilities in post-secondary education. And there's some things that we see in compulsive schooling. So, in the United States, it's kindergarten all the way to 12th grade. In my home country, it might be, first grade all the way to 8th grade. But what are the supports and practices that we're providing and the services that we're providing for students with disabilities? We might know the typical accommodations and supports and academic skills, bringing in, transition needs, all of those things. But when we're moving into a post-secondary education, again, we're not looking at just the student's disability, we're looking at them, in a holistic perspective, and looking at some of the college skills. How is it that their disability, but also their different intersectionalities and identities are going to impact their study skills, their time management, their resource sharing, their self-advocacy, or their technology use. And within a more cultural context, for example, things like self-advocacy can play a big role, or even technology use. In some cultures, self-advocacy is viewed as something that we shouldn't, be doing. So the student may not be able to ask for help or ask for assistance, or if there's assistance provided, but it's not the appropriate one, it may be viewed that they should not speak to an administrator or a teacher or a professor in a certain way, right? That it is perhaps disrespectful, even just asking for help, or even just standing up for making sure that their needs are met. Depending on, where we're at. Technology use may be something that we do on our phones, but others may be that depending on the resources, they might be able to have a computer or not. So how is it that we are within our own context? How is it that we are making sure that our students with learning disabilities are prepared for all of these skills and being able to share within these spaces, these educational spaces, what we know is important for them. And then I think, as I mentioned, looking at it from a very holistic perspective, we know that students with learning disabilities are going to bring more than just, this academic piece or perhaps what we see, what are skills that are needed in college, but they also have a lot of personal things that have into consideration. So family obligations, peer and societal pressures, again, the multiple identities and their intersectionality, and adjusting to college. Students with disabilities in general coming to post-secondary education may have a larger transition needs. So we may have to start a little bit earlier. Depending on where you're at, practices may be that you start at age 16 if you're going to college at age 18, for example. I encourage parents and families always to start talking about this early on, even as early as, elementary school. So what we call, first, second, third grade, fifth grade, as they are moving along, because that adjustment is a really large one, right? The obligations and the skills that are needed are very, very large. So making sure that we prepare them to be successful is something that's very important. And why not giving them what we can provide now? Some other considerations for practice, and as I mentioned before, this frame of reference. So as you're moving into college and as you are thinking about, what are the supports and services that my students may need, or the student that I'm serving may need. Again, looking at that frame of reference from the parents or the family's perspective, from the student's perspective, looking at it from a strengths base, not just looking at how, what are their needs? Are they going to be able to make this class or not? Shift that mindset and really think about how is it that I can get my students' strengths in order to have them as lifelong skills that they can continue to build upon, but may be able to have a foundation for the needs that they may have, right? So if they're really good in technology, perhaps using assistive technology to help them with their reading. And I'll get into that in a little bit, in a second, but making sure that we're using these, their strengths in order to capitalize on their skills. And again, I cannot share this enough with you, but listening and facilitating and reflecting and evaluating is very important, not only from the perspective of educators, but also from the family's perspective and the student's perspective. Always listen to their needs, their goals, their wants before moving forward. All right, I'm sure many of you know what UDL is, Universal Design for Learning. It really is a tool or guidelines that really provide a variability for all learners, not only students with disabilities, but we already think about it from a disability perspective and how these types of practices are going to not only help students with disabilities, but also everybody else in general. So Universal Design for Learning is used, especially in higher education or in post-secondary education, as something that is allowing the students to not only have ownership and flexibility of their own learning, but it also provides a lot of those accommodations that we're used to seeing for individuals with learning disabilities in the classroom, without specifically only having that one student have that accommodation. It kind of levels the playing field for many students, and oftentimes, especially within research, we see that UDL is good and a good practice for everybody, for all student learners. And so I just want to share some common examples of UDL in the world, or mainly universal design in the world, that we already take advantage of, right? So the most widely known example is curb cuts or sidewalks or ramps, right? Not only individuals with physical disabilities and wheelchairs may take advantage of these ramps, but people with strollers or people pushing carts, you know, and bikes or whatever it is, they may use it. Closed captioning on the TV, also, you know, a very easy way to do that. So, light switches, audiobooks. I mean, you name it. There's a lot of different examples within the world that we currently use that are something that is designed for individuals, usually with disabilities, but that we all can use and are able to find very, very helpful. So within the classroom or within your practice, educational practice, there's three different guidelines that UDL really focuses on. I'm not going to go through every single one of them in just looking at the time, but I do want to provide somebody's writing on my I don't know if we can control that or not, Lola. But if I'm going to give some examples of how we can use technology within every single one of these UDL guidelines, right? So for multiple means of engagement, so how can we engage students with learning disabilities in any educational setting, not just post-secondary, but I'm mainly focused on post-secondary settings. So gamification and game-based learning is a really big one. There's a lot of great games out there. I mean, this is even for young children all the way to those in post-secondary education, but there's games for learning. There's a lot of also interactive simulations. There's digital polling and quizzes, video discussions and webinars. We know that now our students are using a lot of technology to communicate with one another. So peer collaborations and online discussions are something that's probably very easy for them to do. One of my favorites is virtual field trips. I love to travel. And I know my students, for example, are unable to travel to many places. So having virtual field trips is a way to not only learn about others, but also a way for them to explore using technology and being engaged in that. For multiple means of representation, some examples of technology are the use of digital text and ebooks. As I was mentioning, with students with learning disabilities, we often see that their reading is one of the main challenges for them. So using digital text and ebooks and using assistive technology, so the computer or the phone, reading those ebooks out loud to them, they're able to learn and process from that. Instead of having to be struggling reading over and over and over. So having this type of technology in most texts now, at least here at the university, we're able to either digitize them or purchase them as ebooks already. We know that video and multimedia is a great way of showing the information, and using visual organizers or mind mapping tools is also a good way to provide this information. Something that has been emerging as some technologies, augmented reality and virtual reality. I talked about these field trips. There's some really great field trips using VR and AR as well, lately. And then finally, using Zoom, for example, as we are doing today. And Zoom has many capabilities, such as closed captioning, the recording, and also using of transcripts that our students, for example, if they're not able to take notes as quickly as others, or they might just want to sit back and listen to the recording, pause it, be able to take notes, they can do so. It is something that's very simple and very easy to do. And as educators, a great tool for us. And then the final one is one of my favorite ones, which is the multiple means of action and expression. This is where we want to know what the student has been learning from or learning about, and giving him that flexibility of sharing it with us. So this is a type of assessment, right, that we're using. And there's a lot of technology that we can use now. So there's digital storytelling tools, for example, video creation. I use a lot of video creation and podcasting in my classes, for example, but also for many of my students with disabilities in post-secondary education. They really enjoy not having to write a paper, for example. They rather share it in a video, be more creative, or in a podcast or as a audio discussion. There's many different ways of making sure that the students are able to share with us what they have learned. But also there's a lot of multimodal presentations. There's a lot of debate and discussion forums. There's many different ways that the students can engage and share with us what they have learned. And again, this is not only helpful for students with learning disabilities, but this is something that any student could take advantage of. And so if you integrate it within your own pedagogy, within your own classroom, it will be very helpful for everybody. And that way it also doesn't pinpoint one student or a couple of students that have learning disabilities in your classroom. So as we think about and really talk about how do we design, and put all these things together from the designing to the evaluating, it's important that we think about using, how do we use technology based on the student's strengths and needs, right? So again, our current students may have a great way to use technology, especially with their phone. Use that as a strength in how you can not only embed other technologies, but how can you use phones or iPads or computers to support them in their learning. Build rapport in relationships with those students. And it may take a little while, but being patient is very, very important. And there has to be a lot of cross collaboration, not only with other colleagues, but also administrators and family members, to gather more data, to make decisions with the student, not about the student, again, very important, but with the student, especially the post-secondary level. The students should be centralized in making those decisions, and not for us as educators or other people be making the decisions for them. And then once we start evaluating, are we evaluating the technology use once it's implemented? Is the student using it in the appropriate way to share what they're learning or to gather the information? Are we doing it from a culturally responsive lens? Sometimes, yes, a student may have access to a phone, but may not have access to a computer, or may not, they might think that advocating for more technology may be something that's culturally not appropriate. So we have to think about it from that perspective. And are we putting all these plans in place from a strengths-based perspective and engaging the student again into making sure that they provide their input about all these things? So for next steps, I really encourage you to think about, are we supporting students with learning disabilities using technology in very specific cultural contexts? So how is it that I'm using culturally responsive practices in UDL and I'm incorporating into my work to support students with LD specifically? And how am I collaborating with others, not only within my unit, but also across, the school or across campus, to make sure that I am supporting and teaching with students with LD within all these frameworks, right? So this is a call for action for all of you. And this is where I like to end my talk today. So a call for action means that what are we going to do next as society, as educators, as family members? It's very important that we think about and we reflect on our daily work, and how can we shift these practices from, again, from looking at disability from a deficit perspective into shifting it to a strengths-based perspective, into supporting society in the ways that we we interact with people with disability, all the way to what are the access and supports that we can provide in post-secondary education and education in general for individuals with disabilities. The second one is the collaboration. We cannot do this alone. We, as an educator, as a professor, I cannot do this on my own. So how is it that I can collaborate with others to make sure that I'm providing the supports, and not only that, but also building the infrastructure within these settings, these educational settings, to support students with learning disabilities or any disability in general. And then the dissemination. How is it that, you know, as a researcher, I take this very much into consideration. So this is why I do things like the talk today. I'm not only here to publish and be able to share my research to other academics, but I like to share it with families and to practitioners, educators, any other community that will find it helpful. And so this may look in many different ways, but we really have to think about how are we disseminating this information. The other calls for action are looking at the students from a very holistic perspective and approach, right? Not only do they bring to the table the strengths and gifts, but also thinking about their intersectionality. So from their disability, their race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, but also thinking about their background and how comfortable are they using technology? How are we using technology in our school or in our unit, right? What are the root causes? Sometimes we don't think about it. We think about it from the practices. Are we having good practices to support students with learning disabilities? But we don't think about what are some of the root causes that perhaps students with learning disabilities don't have access. Do they have the skills to get to post-secondary education? Do they have the supports? Is it too expensive? I mean, all these things, we really have to think about it from that perspective. And can we put in place things like culturally responsive practices, universal design for learning, or other practices to really support them in changing their access and their, in general, their educational supports. And then, of course, it's very important to have and collect data to inform not only our practices, but also policy and research in general. It is very, very important that this data is collected so we can share it with others, right? It can be large quantitative, or it can also be more qualitative, where it's stories, where it is you know, interviews with family members, with students themselves, in what's working and what's not working. So just to wrap up, we talked about this cultural historical framework as a theoretical foundation and how it is important that we take into consideration culture and history within our own context in order to support students with learning disabilities in post-secondary education using that technology, right? We looked over some culturally responsive practices, some examples of universal design for learning using technology, how to design and evaluate some plans, and then lastly, you know, how to be agents of change. So I'm going to stop here and I can take some questions, and I'm happy to answer as best as possible. So again, thank you so much for having me here today. This has been an honor.
Thank you so much, Dr. 𝘼𝙧. That was an informative presentation. I kept on nodding and nodding and nodding. Thank you. Well thought of, well put together. Most of the questions that were sent in, you had answered most of them. There were questions on technology, like, for example, where you worked before, like Ecuador, and you already told us how we can look at what we have on ground and be able to improvise. In your presentation is just detailed. One quick question. Usually we share the presentation with our participants. Do we have your yes to share the presentation? Because it's quite detailed.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Please, can everyone, please, I need to see your emojis if you really enjoyed Dr. 𝘼𝙧's presentation. Let's appreciate for actually an amazing job, Dr. 𝘼𝙧. Thank you. There's several takeaways for me. The first one was said, which was very important, because we need to understand the ages of the students we're working with. And when you said students should be centralized in making decisions about them, especially post-secondary students. That was really, that was the point I needed to highlight, because most times we mix, there's a saying in the disability world in Nigeria that there's nothing about us without us. And we need to be very, very, if the person with disability is not asking you for help, why are you helping? To them is an insult. So thank you. And then we need to know that depending on the age of the individual, ask, what would you want me to do? Where do you need help? Don't just assume they always need help. Thank you for that. And I like the fact that you talk about collaboration. Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. One was someone asked if you can please give us a particular example, probably of the experience in Ecuador when it comes to technology use for individuals with a learning disability in the post-secondary level. Can you give us some of the challenges you experienced and how you were able to overcome it?
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is something that I've experienced in many different countries, right? Especially during the pandemic, where we were forced to move from a traditional classroom environment to a more virtual and technology-based environment, right? So one of the biggest things, for example, was moving into platforms like Zoom, but in some countries, the bandwidth of internet was not available. So Zoom was not something that was useful. So instead of using Zoom, many schools, whether it was elementary all the way to post-secondary education, moved to using WhatsApp. And WhatsApp is a great tool to share, whether it's files or discussion-based. They will do chat groups. All the way to, providing some assistive technology using your phone, because your phone can read that information to you, right? So that's just a simple example. And it could be, anything in whatever language. Thankfully, the technology has gone so far that it will read back to us, not just in English, but I mean, when I was teaching in Ecuador, it was, and even in my home country of Mexico, it will speak to me in Spanish, right? So that's just a sample, practical of what not only the pandemic made us do, but I think also just the way of thinking about technology and the use of technology with tools that are readily available for students already.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I hope we're all learning. Technology you can improvise. Thank you for that, sharing that experience with us. Thank you so much. Real quick, Dr. Barrio, if you are available, if I know you're very busy, and I want to say very, very big thank you to you for your time. We need to move on right now, but before I go on, please, if you'll be requiring a sign language interpreter, look for the name 𝙼𝙼𝙍 𝙼𝙼𝙍, and pin us so that you can see our signing, so you can understand what's going on. I just had to put this out real quick. Secondly, Dr. Barrio, can I trade your indulgence? I know you have the program of event, and I know you're very busy, and I believe some people are just trying to settle into what's going on because you're the first presenter. Some questions might still come up for you during the panel discussion. If you're available, we don't mind you. Please stepping in to answer those questions when we get to the panel section. Will you be available? Can you please do that for us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
thank you, Dr. Barrio. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much again. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you so much. So again, everyone, I enjoyed that session. I truly did. I was just taking notes and I was just nodding my head. So we're going to the next speaker right on, so we can. Our next speaker is Dr. 𝘼𝙼𝙍. Dr. I want to read out our bio. So Dr. 𝘼𝙼𝙍 is a professor in education psychology at the University of North Texas. That's my school. Yeah, she earned a PhD in educational psychology at Rutgers University in 1992. In her role at the University of North Texas, Louis is principal investigator, a parent of preschool youngsters, Texas KP, editor of family relations and graduate faculty with concentration in human development and family sciences. Guys, please pay attention. Dr. 𝘼𝙼𝙍 is here with us, but I'd like to acknowledge Danielle Alvera 𝘼𝙒𝙼𝙬 for being a big part of this presentation. Daniel, we really appreciate you. Therefore, without much ado, I would like to bring up Dr. Wendy Midumis. Everybody give it up for Dr. Wendy Midumis. Guys, there's a lot going on here. We've talked about post-secondary and technology. We've talked about family, I believe, and how we can help individuals with learning disability in cultural context. Everybody give it up for Dr. Midumis. Thank you so much, for Dr. Midumis, for being here with us.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be able to be a part of this event. Lolo, thank you for all your work and all the others who put this together. I will share my screen. While Dr. Barrio was talking, I tried to make it so that it wouldn't come up in presentation mode so that I could continue to see everybody's faces, which is important to me. And I couldn't figure that out, so you will get a highlight of the slides to come as I go through my presentation. But I'm very happy to be here with you to talk about learning disabilities across a cultural context in regard to creating a learning environment for young children and their families, and how to do that across different types of learning environments and learners. If you have any questions as I go along, I'm more than willing to entertain questions as we talk or at the end. I always find Zoom very, very challenging because there's never any response as you get started. So I'm going to start and hope that everybody is ready. What I would like to share with you today in regard to creating a learning environment across different types of learners and different types of families, and thereby supporting learners and learning contexts, is how a program that I work with establishes or works with families and schools to create a sense of learning as being an activity that happens both within the family and the school and across the school and community. This program actually builds that kind of context. And I will begin by first showing, hopefully, a video about the program, which will give us a nice foundation for understanding what's coming. Hopefully this will work. This video is private. And I don't know my, my apologies. Here, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment and just talk to you about the program. The program is a home instruction of parents of preschool youngsters. The unique part of the program is that it creates a sense of learning how to be a teacher for your children across the context and working with individuals in their home. So the home instruction is completed as a program where home visitors visit parents and children in the home and share learning activities. And it's a 30-week program with different types of activities that support children's development of early learning skills. So they learn shapes and colors and puzzles and problem solving, all sorts of activities that are very helpful when children come to school. There are also activities that can be translated across different types of learning styles. The beauty of the program from what I see is that the home visitor is actually a person who has been a parent who has been a recipient of the home visits. So if I were a parent with a preschool youngster and I were to enroll in the HIPPY program, then the person who came to work with me or to share the program with me would be a person who had already gone through the program. So the cultural aspect of that is that we're working from a shared context. So with the home visitor being a parent who is very similar to the parent they're visiting, there's a lot of the context that is shared and comfortable. There's more understanding across the home visitor and the parent because of that shared background that helps the parent view these activities as something that is appropriate for them and their child. That's one of the challenges in creating cultural contexts of learning, is that sense of who am I as a parent, as the person who is helping to educate my child, or am I an educator of my child, or is that something that a school is more the responsibility of the school? So the HIPPY program begins to develop the parents' definition of themselves as how they are going to be interacting across both the learning that their children do at home, the activities that are part of their daily lives at home, and how that is going to build and translate into their child's movement to or entry into a formal school setting. So what the program does, so the home visitor comes, I'm very sorry that the video isn't working, because it's much nicer to see it with little children and parents than it is to hear me try to describe it to you. But with that, the unique part of the HIPPY program, and something I found very striking when I first became involved in this local program, is that although the goal is to prepare the goal is to prepare children to be ready for a formal education, the program doesn't work directly with the child. The program works with the parent. The home visitor comes, shares an activity that the parent can engage in with their child, and it's a play activity. So the play activity may be around colors, it may be around reading, it may be using some aspect of the home environment, cooking, cleaning, all sorts of different activities that a parent may naturally engage in with their children as preschool youngsters. But it integrates an idea of how to prepare the child by providing school readiness skills. In that way, the home visitor shares that sense of being a teacher with the parent. And then the parent can adapt that to how they will interact and play with their children. And across the 30 weeks, all of the different types of skills that children will need as they move into their first years of formal schooling are kind of covered. And so the child improves in terms of, or gains those learning skills. At the same time, the parent gains a sense of how they see themselves as engaged in the preparation for this learning and their role with their children as a teacher and in supporting their children's learning. So it's more or less a it's a multiple generation type of impact that the program has. So what I wanted to share with you today is what are the different aspects of what children learn, what parents learn, and how the home visitor experiences how the home visitor experiences their role in terms of working with families. And working isn't really the right word, because it's really more of a sharing. And I think that that's a very important part of the program. The goal of the 𝘼𝙧 program is to make very comfortable this activity of naturally including learning as part of a family interaction. So with that, I can move back to where we were and share my screen. Okay. So what we do in terms of we have the goal of learning about different types of preschool readiness skills. And what I'm hoping to share with you here is that these are just pictures of what it is that we look at in terms of what the child is doing at the beginning of the program, and how they benefit from the interaction with their parents, and the role playing, and then the activities that the parent has with the child. So we look at colors and letters and numbers, sizes and shapes. I wanted to share some of the outcomes, and if you look across in terms of pre-test and post-test, you can see that there's a general change in terms of the actual school readiness skills themselves. So the program itself, in terms of being effective for the child, is pretty well established. But also there's an impact, and I think the more important part is that there is an impact in the level of involvement that the parent has in engaging with their child in activities that promote this the learning of the skills for the child, but also promote the idea for the parent that they are an active participant in their children's learning. So you'll see that, when asked about how often they read or how often they talk to their child overall, that there's a general sense that they increase their engagement with their children across the time of the program. As well, these are done across the different activities, and you can see that the purple is representing how often the parent and the family percent of families who are saying that they engage in reading activities at the beginning of the program, and then after engaging in the 30 weeks of the program, there's an increase in the likelihood of engaging in reading activities and helping with language activities. As educators, these are very important types of aspects for us to see in terms of parents' engagement with their children. However, more important for the program, and I think what I really would like to share with you today is that not only do the children gain school readiness skills, but that the parent becomes a very active component of the process of being engaged with their children. What's in regard to the cultural context, in regard to the differences in how children learn, by working with the parent and engaging them in these activities, with the parent and the home visitor being engaged in role-playing these activities, the parent then can take this interaction that they've had with the home visitor and engage with their child. One of the things that it's hard for educators to put as much focus on as may be helpful is to understand the child. As children come to school, or as you start at any level of education, each child brings a different capacity for learning. What happens in the HIPPY program is that the parent, who understands the child very well, is able to adapt the learning activities to what is best suited for their children. So not only are you able to share the specific skills, but the parent becomes very comfortable with understanding how their child best learns these skills. What we have found in the program is that provides an opportunity for the parent to become engaged with their child's education as their child moves into a formal school setting. So instead of being a very deep, a divide between learning at home and learning at school, the parent becomes more comfortable with being engaged in, being aware of, and being a facilitator of those educational experiences that their child has. We find that parents are more comfortable being part of parent-teacher conferences or activities in the school. So the program prepares not only the child in terms of building skills, but provides the opportunity for the parent to develop a sense of their role in their child's education. So what we have found is that there is a positive association between the parent's involvement in the program, but also their involvement when their child goes to school. This is very helpful in terms of just creating a source of information for teachers in schools that they may not have by engaging the family in those activities. And what we have found, and I found was very important, because one of the challenges, at least in Texas, is that schools, and there's a cultural difference between there's a difference in level of success very often for children, dependent upon the language that's used in the home, the level of education in the home. So one of the values of the HIPPY program, and one of the goals of our program, is to determine whether or not we can, by engaging parents in this home visiting curriculum, lessen that disparity between how children are prepared for school and how they do in school, that is associated with characteristics such as the family's language, preferred or primary language, or the level of education for that their parents have, and being able to then provide the same preparedness for children, irrespective of what may be family differences, and what schools are best set up to support. Very often our education systems are very comfortable teaching children who whose parents have been in school, have higher levels of education, feel very comfortable interacting with schools and talking with schools, who have the primary language that is used for teaching in the schools. And so the HIPPY program works toward being able to address those differences. And we actually did some work looking at how the home visiting program and whether the home visiting program was helpful in addressing any of those differences when children come to school, and whether or not, and this was what I found very important and what I would like to share today, whether or not helping parents become very involved in those early learning activities with their children actually made a difference for the families that we worked with in terms of their children's success when they got to school. And what we found was that the primary variable that was important in improving children's outcome when they first came to school was supporting parent involvement with their children through these activities of role playing, the teaching of colors and shapes. I mean, it seems very simplistic, and what I'm further exploring is whether or not it's just creating that sense in the parent that they are an important part of this process of learning, and an important component in this process of teaching these very basic skills, and whether or not that change in the sense of self for the parent as a teacher is very important, because that's a changeable thing. And one of the things that we find as educators, or at least I have found as an educator, is that there are many things we can't change. We can't change how somebody learns necessarily. What are the best, we can't change somebody's primary language. We can't change a child's parents' education, whatever, their parents are, have a certain level of education. There are many stable things about a family or about a community, about a culture that are pretty stable. Parent involvement, however, is, in giving, helping or develop or build a sense of a learning community within a family, and the parents' involvement of that community is something that that can be shared. And I was very happy to find that was really one of the driving components that seemed to lead to the success of the child when they went to school, and the engagement of the parent as their children went to school. So it just built a shift in a cultural sense, but not in a culture, which was also very important to me. It didn't say, because the home visitor and the parent are the same, come from the same community, have the same cultural background, have the same experiences. It isn't that the necessity is to change any of those aspects of a family, but rather within that culture of the family and the community to build a sense of being a important and integral part of what my child's learning experiences. So that was a very important part. And what we found was that no matter what was the language of the parent, no matter what was the parent's education, it was the parent involvement that actually played the most significant role in having a positive change in the child's outcomes. And so what you see here is that the parent involvement was what increased, was significantly increased across the program, and was very helpful in building the skills that the child brought to school. I'm running short of time, and one of the other aspects that I wanted to make sure that I shared with you is that the HIPPY program focuses on 3 different parts. Sorry, my fingers look funny, so I could do it this way. 3 different parts of has 3 different components. So the parent and the parent involvement is very important. Building the child readiness skills for the child and setting them on a strong foundation to begin their educational experiences is very important. But equally important is the home visitor and the role of the home visitor in terms of how they help build that change in a sense of the parent as a learner is very important. The home visitor, as I mentioned at the beginning when I was talking about the program, the home visitor was a parent in the HIPPY program. So all of the people who are recruited to be home visitors are people who actually started as parents of preschool youngsters who had a home visitor come to their home, role play within these different activities, and talk with them. And one of the things I would like to explore, and one of the things I would like to encourage you all to think about and consider, as educators, we're always very focused, as we should be and need to be, on academic outcomes and academic work and teaching academic skills. That's what we do as educators. And if we weren't excited about that, we wouldn't be educators, or we wouldn't be particularly good educators. And the HIPPY program has a great curriculum, and the learning activities are well established, very successful across all different, as I noted earlier, but not very clearly perhaps, is that this is a program that started in Israel over 50 years ago. It is now offered in different countries across the globe, including the United States, but it isn't a U.S. program. It's really a global program. What is very important, all to say that the curriculum is very well established. And much to the disdain of many people who have developed the HIPPY curriculum, I don't know that the curriculum is the most important part of the program. I think it's a very essential part. I think that it works very well to teach academic skills is very important. But I think the value and the key part of the success of the program is that relationship between the home visitor and the parent. Because this home visitor comes into the home, and I can guarantee you that they do the role-playing activities, but there's conversation there that builds a sense of how this all works for you, for us in the school systems that are in our community. I think that part of education is essential for success. It's essential for involving the parent, and having that beginning point for the parent, I think, is what helps the parent not only be involved with their children's learning, but also involved with their children's learning as they go to school. So the curriculum is very important, but it's the home visitor and why the home visitor does what they do and how they do it that is very important. And I'm not certain how we develop a sense of that, if it is such an essential component in the formal school setting itself, but creating that link is important, and I think we can learn from the home visitor. So we spent some time. We became I became quite surprised that we know nothing about our home visitors. We look at how much the parents' involvement changes in regard to the child, how much the child's skills increase, but we know very little about what the home visitor's experience was, and yet probably the home visitor is very important to the process. So we look to see not only who demographically in regard to education were our home visitors, but we ask them questions. Why did you want to? So any parent who has been enrolled in the HIPPY program could be a home visitor if they chose to be. So asking home visitors, what attracted you to this? Why was it that you wanted to be a home visitor? So it was a job with a paycheck. Certainly that's important for people, but I had a good experience in the home visiting program. It was a way to help families. So I had this experience that was so helpful to me that I wanted to engage in, I wanted to be a continuing part of this program. People who were parents who were visited by home visitors, who have become home visitors themselves, are also those who become coordinators at different sites. So it's a program that invites people in. I wanted to personal growth and experiences. It was one of the things that was available to them for work, but it was a way to help families. During the pandemic, and the shutdowns that were experienced during that time, the relationship between the home visitors and the parents became a very crucial one. We heard when we asked parents about their experience during that time. What was the best part of being a home visitor? It was the family interactions, watching and helping improvements in parent-child relationships. So the home visitor does feel very much a part of that process. One of the goals of being a home visitor is then to build not only that interaction with the families, but then to help that home visitor in terms of gaining work skills that then provide them an opportunity to take on different roles in their community. Because it's 9:30, I'm going to end there. But in doing so, what I'm hoping that I have shared is that creating a context for learning can be done within a cultural setting, can be created across different types of learners by sharing with parents the sense that they are important to not only those early learning experiences, but also to their involvement with their child's education and how education works in their community. So it's something I've been very happy to be a part of, and very happy to have had the opportunity to share with each of you today. I've talked for longer than I would like to hear myself talk, so I thank you for your patience and as I talk. But if there are any questions, I would be more than happy to share any insights I might have.
Thank you so very much, Dr. 𝑘𝑒𝑚𝑒. My notebook is filled with several ideas that you've shared. I like the fact that the home visitors are actually parents themselves. So they understand what parents are going through. And it's easier for parents to have a good relationship with them when they go for home visiting. I also like the fact that the home visitors role play what they're trying to show the parents. That's a good learning strategy. For me, role playing, just show me how it's being done and I'll do it. That's a good one. Also, the fact that parents are part it makes it, and then talking about goes into the home and realize that there's something going on that can be passed early to the school and then the support can start as early as possible. Thank you so much. Thank you. For me, I believe there are parents here, there are teachers here, there are parent support groups here that can adopt such program, the HIPPY program. For me, when I heard you speak about it the other day with me, I'm like, this is amazing. Parents need to feel supported before they can be a part of their children's learning. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think it's also another form of training the trainers, where professors train teachers. That's another way of training parents. This is an amazing. Everyone give it up to Dr. Middlemis. Thank you. And whether you've taught for long or not, we totally enjoyed the depth of knowledge you brought to us today. Thank you. Now, there are one or two questions, and I'll really read out the two questions real quick. But if you're also available during the panel session and there are questions that relate to you, we don't mind you joining up to answer the question. The first one is, when you have you ever had a situation, want to share this experience with us, where you meet in a culture where parents don't feel that they owe it to the child to know about the child's learning, probably because they are busy with work, trying to make ends meet, or because they are illiterate, or they just don't, they feel this child will get the best it can from school. How do you deal with such situation? That's the first question.
Well, and I think that that's a very valuable question to address. There are very many different elements within any family that contribute to the likelihood or the capacity of the parent to be an educator. One is, I can remember when I was considering whether I wanted to have a child, I didn't want to have a child because I didn't want to teach them how to talk, to learn and to read. It was just like, oh no, I don't want to. That just really sounds awful. I have a child, he can talk. It wasn't so bad. And I think that's actually an important part of it. There are things you can do that are much more natural. I don't necessarily have all of the background knowledge that's necessary to teach my child everything. I think it's just the idea that I'm a part of it. So, and I'm not a part of it as being an educator, a formal educator. I'm just a parent. And what activities I provide for you. So if I'm a very busy parent, there are activities I can involve you in, and that don't require my continued attention, but rather beginning, observing, and acknowledging an outcome are ways that you can engage me. And I think it's also one of the important elements of the HIPPY program, and having that home visitor being a person who's been in very similar contexts, is that they're aware that you have jobs, that some of the elements of the program may be things that you're not knowledgeable of. So so I think it's just that's part of the flexibility, but also part of the awareness that those are challenges.
Thank you. I think for me, one of the very important things you said during your response is awareness. So we need to keep providing awareness, let parents understand the strength that comes with being involved with their children's learning. And really, when we talk about parents, there are different kinds of families. So it could be the uncles, the aunties, the grandparents who will be willing to take that role because probably the mother and father are not available. Thank you so much. Now, another question about the HIPPY program that you talked about. Is this program just for early years, or can it be adopted for also middle school, primary school, like we say back home, or even higher education? Can that be adopted? And if it can be, are you willing to share like a framework with anyone here who might want to fill in that gap in our part of the world?
Currently, the HIPPY program itself works with children who are 2 to 5 years old. That's the focus. But the construct and the framework of the program would be adaptable across different ages. And it would just be a matter of, so if you're working with a parent of children who are in middle school, what are the elements of learning that are important? What is the role of the parent, and how can the parent support that person? So you could take the framework and create a context or a curriculum that would be interesting. I think that would be fascinating to do. So if people have specific questions about it, I don't have programs or answers, but it would certainly be something I'd love to chat about, because it's very, very interesting.
Thank you so much, Dr. 𝘼𝙒𝙼𝙍. Thank you. I totally enjoyed this session, and I believe everyone else did. I hope you, I can't see you. I saw some emojis, but there should be more, because that was a deep one. It was something we can borrow and we can use. There's nothing. Research has shown that when parents are involved with their children's learning, we see better output from the children. So thank you, Dr. 𝘼𝙒𝙼𝙍. If you're still available during the panel session, if there are questions for you, please step in. So without much ado, yet again, we have one more speaker. And this is the person of Dr. Pamela Peak. I'll read Dr. Pamela Peak's bio real quick, and then she gets on with us and share our knowledge with us. Dr. Pamela Peak earned a PhD in special education from the University of North Texas. Dr. Peak has spent more than 30 years working in various capacities in area school districts, but all with students with special needs. Our research focuses on the development and use of educational assessments. I'll say that again. Our research focuses on the development and use of educational assessment to reduce the disproportionality of culturally and linguistically diverse students in special education and in-service teacher preparation. Get your questions ready. Get your questions ready. She has developed widely used assessment instruments, including the Test of Early Written Language, 3rd edition, TEWL3, and Young Children's Achievement Test, 2nd edition, YCAT2. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome with me, Dr. Pamela Peak. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Pamela Peak. I am so excited you're with us here today, and we can't wait to hear all that you have to share with us. Thank you so much for being here. Over to you, Dr. Peak.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here on this Saturday, and I've heard some great information so far, and hope I have some additional information to share for you and to support some of the great best practices that we've heard. So today we're going to talk about disability, dyslexia, and diversity. To tell you, Lola was so great to say a little bit about me, but just to give you a little bit, I've been married for 32 years. I have a daughter who is at the University of Minnesota as in biomedical engineering. My son is a nurse in the emergency room. I've been at the University of North Texas for many years. I'm starting my 20th year. I train people to evaluate and to test students with disabilities. A fun fact I like to tell everyone is that my husband worked on the television show Barney. And so there are my little kids there on the set. That is just fun. Y'all can see everything, right? Thumbs up, Lola. You can see my shared screen, correct? Excellent. All right, so let's get right into it. So today, we're going to look at disability, dyslexia, and diversity. We're going to talk a bit about specific learning disabilities, but more importantly, how dyslexia fits into that eligibility. We're going to look at the characteristics and underlying causes, and then we're going to look at a case, a young first grader, Adeline. And then we're going to summarize it all together to pull together the eligibility and recommendations of what we would do for Adeline. So starting off, learning disability. When we look and think about an SLD, it simply is a disorder in one or more of the psychological processes, but it impacts our students' ability to use language, whether it be spoken language or written language, to think, to speak, to read, write, spell, and to do math. So it can be pervasive across all of a student's learning. When we think of a specific learning disability, it does include those perceptual disabilities. It includes dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. Students with a specific learning disability typically have an adequate intelligence, and they've had those adequate educational opportunities. So they've had great teaching by qualified teachers, interventions. They've had all of that, those opportunities. An SLD does not include students who may have a hearing impairment or a vision loss. Students who have an intellectual disability, they would not fall under this. Students who have behavior as their primary difficulty. So we have to be careful, because a lot of times we have coexisting characteristics. We will have students with a specific learning disability who also have much difficulty attending. However, if we think that attention is a primary, we need to address that before we address a specific learning disability. If we don't take care of where the problem is or the referral question, that's going to lead us down an incorrect route. As Dr. Middlemiss mentioned, we rely a lot on our parents and those parent involvement, because much of the time that involvement gives us that initial and primary concern. And if we're hearing that that is attention, we need to kind of address that route first. However, if it's leaning toward inability to learn letters, difficulty reading, just struggling with continued efforts but making minimal progress, then that's where we want to look for a specific learning disability. In Texas, dyslexia, or under the education code, it's a disorder. So dyslexia falls as one specific learning disability, and that's where I'm going to kind of focus. So it's not just a difficulty to read. There's a little bit, there's more to it, and a specific component must be evident. We're going to look at that in just a moment. But dyslexia is a disorder that's manifested by a difficulty to read, to write, and to spell, despite the great instruction, despite adequate intelligence, and despite the sociocultural opportunities. So we are looking for students who have had that adequate instruction, that great foundational skills to learn their letters, learn their sounds, practice blending them together, practice segmenting them apart. Now, some facts and some myths. An early clue of dyslexia could be a delay in speaking. That's not to say that every young child has a delay in speaking. There could be some environmental factors that look like dyslexia, but that indeed are not dyslexia. And dyslexia can be genetic. Much of the time, we will find that parents, a parent or a sibling or an aunt or uncle has struggled with reading. Some of the myths: letter reversals indicate that a student has dyslexia. Now, students with dyslexia may have letter reversals, but that is not a sign that a student has dyslexia. It's not primarily a vision problem. Gifted individuals, they can also have dyslexia. Most students with dyslexia are not left-handed. That's a myth. And then lastly, that dyslexia is cured. We hope that with strong interventions and strong instruction, that we provide students the skills and the strategies to be effective readers. Statistically, oh, excuse me, I apologize for that. Here we go. Boop. I was trying to scoot mine down. 1 in every 5 students is diagnosed with dyslexia, making it the most common learning disability. And as expected, children of color and of poverty have a much higher prevalence. It's very disproportionate. So we want to be aware of that as we move through. And the case that we're going to look at shortly is of a student who has dual language. So we'll look at that. So some of the primary characteristics, and when you look at these, they're going to be similar to students who have a specific learning disability. So students have a difficulty reading, whether it be real words or nonsense words. So we will give them a word list such as and the, brother, and they're just having to read those words in isolation off a word list. But then we also give them nonsense words. So we may put some letters together like BAF, BAF, or now I'm going to MIB, MIB. And those nonsense words, and we're seeing if students are able to use their phonetic knowledge and be able to sound those words out. And then lack of fluency, lack of accuracy is very slow on students as a primary characteristic. And lastly, the difficulty to spell. And we do not expect students, young children, to have all of these characteristics, but these are just some of the primary. Dyslexia, though, it's important to identify early. It's not unusual to identify later as well. So children in upper elementary, middle school, or even in secondary. So after the secondary characteristics, we look for some, after the primary characteristics, we look for some secondary characteristics. And if you think about it, if a student is having a difficult time sounding out words and fluently reading and reading accurately, then a secondary difficulty is going to be they're going to struggle comprehending their text. They're going to struggle writing and getting all of their ideas on paper. We want to make sure that, their difficulty has to be unexpected for the student's age. So, for example, if I have a young student in kindergarten, we're learning sound. A lot of students come to kindergarten with letters and sound knowledge. However, if a young student doesn't have that knowledge, that's not unexpected for 5 years old at early kindergarten. Okay, but at the end of first grade, after having 2 years of ongoing instruction by an effective teacher, that would be unexpected at this stage. So we do have to look, is this unexpected for a student's age and educational level? Clearly, we're not going to have a difference due to result of language. We have a student whose primary language is not English. That has to be looked at. Of course, we can't expect them to be blending sounds and reading words in English if their primary language is a different language than English. And as I have mentioned, there's typically a family, oftentimes there is a family history. So the difference between a specific learning disability, say in reading, and dyslexia is the underlying causes. So this slide becomes very, very important. We can have students who struggle reading, but they do know their sounds. They are able to manipulate sounds. They are able to hold information in their memory and then put those sounds and blend those sounds together. However, students with dyslexia do not have that capacity. So they either struggle blending them together. So they will look at the word cat and they'll go, at, and you're like, come on, okay, put it together. And they're like, at, and they're incapable of blending that together to cat and getting the word. They cannot hear that that word pulls together and is indeed cat. Or secondly, the memory. They're not able to hold the first sound, and they'll get the second and the third, but they'll drop and forget the first. So it's that ability to hold sounds in their memory. Oftentimes when we look at their cognition, there may be a difficulty with short-term memory. Not always so. And then thirdly, students who have a difficulty rapidly naming things that are automatic. At a certain point, students should automatically be able to name familiar objects, name the colors, name the letters of the alphabet. That's not something they should be having to think about. It becomes automatic. And students who struggle to do that, that could be an underlying cause for dyslexia because they don't have that fluid automaticity. So we're going to move in now that we've kind of set the tone, we've set the prevalence, we know about 1 in 5, we've kind of looked at some facts and some non-facts, as well as the primary, the secondary, and the underlying causes of dyslexia. We're going to look at a young student, 𝘼𝙗𝙗. And when we think about 𝘼𝙗𝙗, I want to keep track of my time here. I want to, there we go. When we think about 𝘼𝙗𝙗, she's in grade 1. She's 7 years old. She was evaluated in May of 2023, so a few months ago. She passed her hearing and vision screenings, very important because we cannot identify students with a learning disability and subsequently dyslexia if we have a hearing difficulty or if we have a vision problem. So it's critical that we have current. We can't say that they passed it 3 years ago. It needs to be current within a year. We know from parents, we have that parental input. We know that 𝘼𝙗𝙗 did meet developmental milestones. We do know that 𝘼𝙗𝙗 was impacted by COVID. She did not have a typical preschool development or experiences as our other students. So we need to take that into consideration. There is no family history of learning disabilities. She does have appropriate emotional and behavior skills, so we're not worried. She's a really good student, attention. She can attend well. She can communicate and engage with her peers. She has great attendance, so that shows us that she's had opportunities to learn. And then even with interventions, she's been in small group interventions focused on reading, in particular, blending words together. She is making minimal progress. And based on informal data, 𝘼𝙗𝙗 is below the 20th percentile compared to her same age peers in reading. So that gives us a little background of what brought 𝘼𝙗𝙗 to an evaluation in that parents and teachers were concerned. So looking a little further at her language skills, 𝘼𝙗𝙗, she does speak Spanish in the home. However, she prefers English. Testing was completed in initial proficiency testing on 𝘼𝙗𝙗 was completed in Spanish and English to see if there was a difference. And results showed that 𝘼𝙗𝙗 did better in English. So because of that, even at her young age, the remainder of the testing was completed in English. Parents and teachers did share that she's able to follow instructions. She understands jokes. So that tells us that she does have some good receptive language as well as some expressive language. She does struggle to understand word meanings, remember information just heard, express herself fluently, and sequence events. So those are just some of the things. And if you think back, She struggles remembering information just heard. So let's think about that. She also struggles blending things together. And when we think about that underlying causes, we may want to think about, I wonder how her phonological memory is. Is she able to hold those sounds in her memory? Is that why she's not able to blend together, because she can't hold those sounds in her memory? Looking here, it tells us that she struggles to remember information just heard. So that may be a connection. We're not sure yet, but that gives us a bit of information. All right, now we want to see what 𝘼𝙗𝙗's intellect, what her IQ, her cognitive abilities are like. So if you look here, I'm unfamiliar if y'all are familiar with the Kaufman Assessment Battery for Children or the Woodcock-Johnson test. I'm going to point some things out to you. I'm looking at 7 different cognitive abilities. So right here, if you look right here is long-term retrieval. And if you look here, an 8 and 11, I like anything 7 to 13. And anything 85 to 115. So if you look here at her long-term memory, fantastic, within normal limits, exactly what we want to see. If you look at her fluid reasoning right here, fluid reasoning has a lot to do with problem solving. It's highly connected to math, and reading comprehension, that ability to problem solve. Again, exactly where we want it to be, within normal limits. Her short-term memory, oh, look at that. It's within normal limits as well. That's great. Visual processing, looking at things visually, again, within normal limits. Her comprehension knowledge, that's very verbal, very language-based. It's linked strongly to listening comprehension and oral expression. Of course, teacher said that she could understand jokes, all of that is within normal limits. And auditory phonological awareness. Now, this one is a part of that underlying cause. We're going to look at some additional numbers in a minute. But this particular one is within normal limits. To be noted, processing speed. So this is to do things quickly and automatically. Students who struggle with processing speed, and if you see Adeline is low average and all the subtesting composites given to her, that students who struggle here struggle to do things automatically. So when they come into the classroom, if a teacher were to say, get out a piece of paper, put your name and date on there, Adeline may struggle. She'll be like, name. I got to put my name and then date. Where's the date? Where's the date in the room? And she'll find the date, whereas everyone else has already gotten all their papers set up and is ready to go. Just struggles with that automatic processing. So that gives us a little bit of information. Looking at her academics, informally, remember she's in grade 1. She's able to identify the names and sounds of all of her letters. She can read consonant, vowel, consonant words. So like cat, she can read short A words with 80% accuracy, short E words with 40%. So you can see there how she's doing. And for a first grader, not too bad. She can make some reasonable predictions about a story. She can write independently her first and last names. She identifies number symbols and count objects to 11. Verbally, she can count to 39. And then some informal data in a screener does show that she is at risk for dyslexia. So we do have that data. Looking at the formal assessment, you can see here that her basic reading, her ability to read words common words as well as made up words. These are all make-believe nonsense words. She's in the low average range. It's clearly impacting her comprehension. That's in the low average range. Oh, but her writing's good. She has some good skills. She can put concepts together, subjects and verbs, and write a simple sentence. However, her spelling is impacted. Lastly, looking at her math, both math problem solving, and math computation are impacted. And then I said lastly that I want to look right here. This is reading fluency. It's looking at her rate, how quickly she can read, how accurately she can read. And those go together to give us an overall fluency. So you can see Adeline's academics are hindered. They are below that of her peers. Now, looking at that underlying cause, her ability to blend things together, to manipulate sounds. Overall, you remember 7 to 13 is what we want to see. 7 to 13. And if you look right here, she is doing within normal limits. However, when we combine these two, it does give us a low average on that rapid naming. That's that ability to quickly name objects, name letters, name colors, and numbers. All those go together. And she is struggling.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, ma.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering what happened to our speaker. Can we see her at the end?
No.
Okay, just give me a minute. I'll reach out to her.
We're back. I'm so sorry. You just popped away. I'm going to share my screen again. Hold on. If that's going to happen to anyone, it's definitely going to be me. All right, here we go. We're back with Adeline. Look at that. I gave y'all a little break. Adeline needs breaks. She needs to have her brain. Okay, we ready? Okay, so
Yes.
looking here, Adeline, we know we have that underlying cause. So let's put that all together. Oh, are we sharing? There we go. Thumbs up. You can see it? Okay, excellent. So if we look here at our dyslexia profile, our primary characteristics are right there in the yellow. These are assets. We have a great cognitive ability. We have great listening, oral expression. We do struggle in math reasoning. We'll talk about that. Some of her underlying causes. Look here. Her phonological awareness is good. Her phonological memory is okay. But that rapid naming, she doesn't have that automaticity. And then if you look at those, how it's impacting her academics and her reading comprehension and written expression. Written expression, remember, she was able to write, but her spelling was terribly impacted. So for that reason, when we look at the analysis of Adeline, let's pull it all together here. I get nervous moving y'all's little pictures around. I can't. Here we go. There we go. We recognize up front that she did not have a sensory impairment. She did not have intellectual disability. We looked at cultural differences, in particular, the language differences. She had good instruction. All of those things were taken into account. We looked at a variety of data. We triangulated data from her parents, from her teacher, We have observation data of Adeline. We had informal data of in the classroom that she was performing below the 20th percentile. We had her grades. We had, and then lots of formal assessment data. She had great emotional and behavior functioning. She was a dual language learner, but she was still, her language abilities as far as her receptive and expressive language were great. Super instruction in reading and math, adequate cognitive abilities. However, she still struggles in the areas of basic reading and reading fluency, and those deficits may impact all other areas where reading is necessary for success. So you can see how reading is necessary for math problem solving. That may be a reason why she's struggling so much there. So when we look at eligibility, Adeline did meet criteria as a student with a specific learning disability in the areas of basic reading and reading fluency with the condition of dyslexia. So when we look at the recommendations, we're going to look at recognizing that the basic reading and reading fluency with the characteristics of dyslexia, that she would benefit from a standard protocol of dyslexia instruction. She would benefit from very explicit reading instruction that identifies skills and concepts, connects to previous learning, models step-by-step scaffolding instruction. She would also benefit from oral administration of assignments in math problem solving. We're going to read that aloud to her so that reading, it does not impact her ability to calculate. And if you remember as well, she had that underlying cause of rapid naming. She also had that cognitive weakness of processing speed. Those link together. So some recommendations for that, because she just does not process as quickly or typically as her peers. So we're going to give her some more time. When we ask her a question, we're going to pause and give her a moment to comprehend. When she is ready to, we might explain and present things at a more deliberate pace. We're going to avoid some overcrowded worksheets so that she can process what is there. We're going to reduce the quantity of work, because if she's going to take longer to process, we're not going to, she can't be doing homework or classwork for 2 hours, and increase that wait time we talked about. So in conclusion, and then we'll have some questions. In conclusion, it's important to note that these learning disabilities, they can vary widely in their presentation and their severity. Students look different from student to student. A learning disability as well as dyslexia looks different from student to student. I joke a lot to say, if it were similar, if the presentation were that common, I would write that book and I would retire. We would have the prescription of exactly how to identify, but students aren't like that. They look so dramatically different, and that brings, but our goal is to tease through that, write a great plan, great recommendations and accommodations so that they can overcome their challenges and reach their full potential. So there we go. How are we on time? Oh, look at that. At 31 minutes and I got bumped out.
Yeah, and you had so much information for us, and you were right on time. Everybody, give it up for my doctor. I said,
thank you so much, Lola.
Topic has been so supportive of the work we do at the academy. I remember asking about some other assessment we could help the Nigerian populace with, and she was more than happy to get on board with us. So this is to teachers who are wondering, how do we get such dyslexia reports? Because I've had teachers say to me, oh, we get some report that is just more of the psychological. We don't know what to do when it comes to the academic placement and the kind of intervention the child will be requiring. This presentation had broken that out to you, that it's possible to get the details of whatever is going on with that child. Thank you so much, Dr. Peak. This is amazing. I'm really excited. And I bet everyone was paying close. There was no interruption during your presentation. Even when you were gone, everybody was waiting, and we had to like, she needs to get back up here. Thank you so much, Dr. Pick. I got
You are welcome.
Thank you.
Thank
One
you. Thank
more
you.
question. There are lots of questions, but let me put this real quick, talking about cultural context and dyslexia. We've had people, and people have asked this question where, because the individual was not identified either early enough or was never identified, and then this person now has to go to college, and the school is asking, maybe for example, the child, and this is based on our context in Nigeria. So a child is dyslexic and was never assessed and never identified, and then it goes through preschool to elementary, and then this child has to take some external exams, and we don't have any information, so to say this child will be requiring support for these exams, and that's a big deal. Like most developed countries will ask, show us something to be able to prove your point. What would you advise? How do you think we can go about such challenges?
That's a great question for the older, and I get that here as well. You have to start collecting data. You're going to have to get, now, if it's an older student, they can provide a lot of information. So you need to interview. You need to ask the parent if they're not legal to, provide their own information with the parent. You need to get their grades. You need to look at that. If you see that a student is making A's and B's and doing adequately through all of their years, and now we're going to college, I don't know if that warrants specialized accommodations or recommendations. It depends. However, if we see that they're making C's and a D, or maybe even some B's, and we're hearing that, oh no, I studied 4 hours every single day, I did homework on the weekend, that was me pushing as hard as I can push to make those grades, then we need to do an evaluation. And like we did for Adeline, and we need to find, where is the cognitive, is there a cognitive weakness that might be impacting? Are there any underlying areas in academics that then can give us some insight? So that's what you want to look at, but it's an individual by individual, but it's all driven by the data. You've got to pull the data. And by data, that's not just the formalized testing data. That can be a large part of it, because a lot of times that's what's missing. But you have to pull in everything else across everybody. And if you have access to the teachers, if they're in secondary, we need to do that and reach out and get information from them. Another really big point, I don't know if this is in Nigeria, but it makes a big difference when you're looking at grades, especially for our older students, if teachers allow them to redo assignments or redo exams. Because if they're showing A's and B's, and that's because things have been allowed to be redone, then that's not a true representation of how that student did. They didn't make an A or B the first time, they redid it to get the passing grade. So that's a very critical component. And again, look at that attendance. Okay, we can't say students are struggling if they haven't been to school. Okay, so if they're turning in 30-something absences every year, they've missed like a quarter, a fifth of the education compared to everyone else. That's significant. That's significant.
Thank you. I like the fact that you said data. It doesn't have to be a formal assessment, but something to show that this child will be, or this individual will be requiring support. It's very, and I think it's as simple as just get data, put the child, the student's portfolio, make sure you have the academic portfolio as a proof that something is going on. That can be scanned.
That is true.
Done in whatever way. Another question that, please guys, keep your questions coming. The reason we're here, Dr. Pick being here is a big deal because she's always very busy. So take all you can and ask all your questions right now. I know a lot of us have individuals with dyslexia in our classrooms, in our homes. This is your plug. You need to talk to Dr. Pick right now. So keep the questions flowing. Another question we have is a situation where you have a child who is not speaking, not communicating appropriately. And this child is also struggling with reading and writing. is there a connection? Is there a connection? What strategies can we use to help this child? Otherwise, it's brilliant, if I may say. But those are the areas. Is there a connection between learning dyslexia and speech, language, and communication? And if there is, what strategies can we use to help these students?
Oftentimes, students with dyslexia do have average listening comprehension and oral expression skills. So if that is significantly impaired, if you're finding that that is a primary, you need to get with speech and language. Okay, they need to be the primary. So at minimum, we need to start there and get it
You
in
actually
full.
stuck to your shoes.
Yes, no.
And your socks.
If you are hiking,
Oh, I'm hearing someone. A full
so sorry
speech
about
and
that.
language, that's okay. A full speech and language evaluation, and we need to see. Again, if I have a student who does have, say, a weakness in listening comprehension, that's going to impact all academics. If they cannot, school is very verbal, teachers talk a lot. So if they're unable to comprehend through their listening, that's going to impact all academics. But I would go the speech and language route first, start those interventions if that warrants. If we see limited progress, then maybe we need to go over and look at a specific learning disability and or dyslexia. But we need to go there first because, like I said, with the attention, you have to go to the main problem. I'm not going to go looking at dyslexia for attention. I'm going to go to a physician first and have a physician send a report regarding attending. The same with speech or, language as far as the speech and language path.
Thank you for that. Any more questions? I need to read out one more question. I'm checking the chat. Any question, please? Amazing. Everyone is praising you so much. A lot of emojis here for you, Dr. Pick. You've done an amazing work, and we're really excited for what you've done with us so far. That definitely, if you have more questions, if you're still with us, we will definitely reach out to you. But just to put it out there for all teachers who are thinking, how do we, I know there was a question about, so if a child is struggling, what do we do? Where do we go to? Cadet Academy is able, we do assessment to identify students living with dyslexia. And we also have the support of Dr. Pick, ensuring that you have the kind of results that she shared with us during this presentation. And I believe we can actually, the slides will be shared just in case you have other questions. Reach out to the Cadet Academy and we would respond to you based on your questions. Thank you so very much, Dr. Pick. I'll let you go for now. And then
Thank you.
If you're still available, please. When the
Y'all
questions
have a great rest of your conference. Thank you. Thank you.
One question real quick. I see one real quick. It says, have you had to deal with misdiagnosis before? Like a child getting an ADHD diagnosis, but you suspect dyslexia as a child fits with dyslexia criteria? Hello, Dr. Pick, are you still there? Okay, I guess you answered that question. I can't see, I think what happened earlier on had happened again, but I'll reach out to her and she'll be back to answer that question. So I'll keep that question and then probably during the panel session or whenever we have her. Thank you so much, Dr. Pick, for all that you've done for us to do. We truly appreciate that. So we're gonna go on a short break real quick. Just a minute. We'll go on a short break real quick, and no one should please leave. Do not leave. Just a little bit of a break. Please, we need you here because after that, we're going straight to the panel session where we'll have some professionals who will be talking to us for a couple of minutes, and then we throw questions at them. It's a panel session. Some of the questions that were not answered initially will be answered by them and our presenters, and then we would be rounding off towards the end of the panel session. So just a short break, but we need you to be here live right now. Thank you.
Dyslexia. 5 facts. Dyslexia was discovered more than 100 years ago, but many people still don't understand it. Dyslexia is very common. 1 in 5 people have dyslexia. Dyslexia is passed on through families. Dyslexia is neurological. It affects the way the brain processes written and spoken information. It is not caused by a physical problem with eyesight or hearing. It is much more than reading and spelling. Dyslexia also affects memory, sequencing, and organization. Dyslexia is different for everyone, so it is important to understand the difficulties. Processing speed, phonological awareness, working memory, executive function, and auditory processing.
My name is 𝘼𝙒𝙼𝙍, and I just concluded the 12-week online training in special needs, basic training on special needs education, organized by the 𝙚𝙏𝙀 Academy. It has been a life-transforming experience, really, because I kind of just stumbled into it. As a parent, all I needed to do all I was interested in is how I could manage my child better, understand her educational needs better. So I came across Mrs. Aneke, and it was like a roller coaster experience. She made special needs so easy. She kind of demystified it and encouraged. I saw her passion in getting people to know more about about it, and I just keyed into it. So it has been like kind of one program, one course or the other with her, and accumulating in this, it's a huge achievement for me as a parent. And you know, it has taken it beyond me managing my child to now thinking about extending this knowledge to other people. I happen to be the convener of the Engraced Ones Prayer Support and Advocacy Initiative. This is a support group for parents and children who live with special needs. So, and not just passing on this information to other parents. Now we also have our educational arm called the School of Grace, in which this knowledge is really, really used. I want to appreciate Mrs. Aneke for bringing out this in me. Thank you, and I really recommend this course for as many people who genuinely want to make a change in their lives.
Welcome back, everyone. I think we need to stretch. I was like, oh, I should have told people to stretch because it's not healthy to sit for 2 hours at a stretch. Please do that for your own health benefit. I'm actually doing that. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Wow, it's been a wonderful experience for me. It's been. Now we are back to the next part of this conference, and we're going to be having a team of panelists who will be talking to us about what we're doing, which is learning disability in cultural context. They're going to be sharing some ideas with us, and we're going to be asking questions. Please, please, please put your questions in the comment chat so that I can gather it all together. My team and I can gather it together and be able to get answers from you, from our panelists and our speakers. Please do that so that we can have it all answered as soon as possible, please. The ones that have not been answered will definitely get to it, but it came in once the speakers were done speaking. So try to get your questions together real quick. Thank you so very much. Now we'll be going to the panel session, and it's with great pleasure to introduce the lead panelist, who happens to be Dr. Samantha Justin. I call her Dr. Sam. Dr. Sam will be the lead panelist for this panel session. I'll quickly read out a bio, and then she'll take it from there, introduce the other, she'll speak to us briefly, and then introduce the other panelists and get your questions answered. Dr. Samantha 𝘠𝙧𝙀𝙎 was formerly educated in Jamaica, where she completed a Bachelor of Science in Psychology. In England, she received a Master's of Arts in Education and then completed a PhD in Psychology in Australia. Using the cognitive psychology lens, Samantha's expertise and interest lies at the intersection of education and psychology. She aims to link these areas with evidence-based e-learning technologies to improve teaching, learning, and assessment outcomes. Ladies and gentlemen, why did I say gentlemen? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm always so excited. Welcome with me, Dr. Sam. Dr. Sam, I appreciate you. I know you're in transit, but you're still doing this with us. Thank you so very much for always being here with us. Over to you. I can't see those emojis. Please give it out for Dr. Sam. Thank you so very much, everyone.
Thank you so much. I am really excited to be here and just to engage in the discussion. I've been able to joining and listen to some of the sessions so far. And I am just excited by what we as a panel will be discussing this afternoon, this morning, this evening, wherever you are. Maybe it's already nighttime. But yeah, it's really a time to have that conversation around how we can ensure that we are we're taking care of for students, particularly students with disabilities. And so please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. So in terms of this panel, I will just speak briefly, maybe 10-15 minutes thereabout, and then I'll introduce the rest of the panel for them to provide their input, and we'll just have this conversation. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat, and then I will make sure that I keep an eye on the chat. So for me, one of the things, or at least I wanted to focus my efforts on 3 areas where it concerns reading development. So I want to first speak about some of the things that I have been doing at the policy level, some of the other things that we can do at the school level, and then also at the design level. And I'll explain each of them as I go along. And starting off at the policy level, some of the things that I have been involved with to date, particularly this year, is really around a project with the Federal Ministry of Education in Nigeria. And so one of the big things that I've been focused on this year is to look at helping or consulting with the government in Nigeria to improve or to really develop the national reading framework for primary 1 and primary 2 in Nigeria, and specifically looking at how we can develop the national language policy. Now, it was interesting in terms of coming onto this project, and as I go along, what I will do, I will share the relevant links in the chat. But one of the interesting things that I was very excited to see, it's a project that's funded by USAID, and the aim of the project is to really, it's a large-scale project to really benefit 3.5 million students across Nigeria to really improve their literacy, reading, but more broadly, literacy skills. And so one of the things that I was really, in our meetings with the federal ministry and, you know, just the wider government, one of the things that I was really emphasizing is that we don't have to just develop everything all together. We can start at primary 1 and primary 2, and then this can be used as a framework to then develop for the rest of the grade levels. So we have to do it in a very strategic way, because one of the biggest things or biggest issues when I speak to teachers or parents is that they feel so constrained, they don't know what to do. And oftentimes this comes from a lack of, you know, policy development. So this is where we really want to we have the grassroots initiatives, but also at the same time, we also have to have it being enshrined and implemented within the policy level. So one of the biggest things, at least my role on that project, was to really provide some capacity building development initiatives for the federal ministry. So back in June, actually, it was just recently, one of the things that we did is I designed a 3-day capacity building workshop. And the point of that workshop was really to offer a strong foundation for really achieving the project's goal in terms of developing this national reading assessment strategy in Nigeria. And we spoke about many things. We spoke about understanding things like the early grade reading assessments, different things related to the science of reading, which I will speak about in a bit. And I'm sure my panelists, you know, the persons on the panel will speak a little bit more about that as well. And also the national language policy. And I think this language policy is, you know, very, very important, because a lot of times we see, or at least one of the things that I tend to see, is that these assessments are taken from contexts such as in the global north, where assessments are developed in the United States and the UK. And yes, these assessments are fine. They're valid and they're reliable. Those are 2 things we need to think about when we're developing a reading assessment. Is it valid? Can it tell us what we want it to tell us? And is it reliable? Will it give us the same performance over time? But I think a very important thing to remember is also, is the assessment fair? And this is a problem when we're developing assessments and we're taking assessments that were developed not in our own context. We need to think about how we're going to contextualize the assessment. And a big part of the program, this capacity building program that I delivered, was really, how do we contextualize it? How do we develop these assessments for the Nigerian context? And in Nigeria, we have over 500 distinct languages. And one of the things that we got out of that session was, yes, we're going to focus on some key languages, Yoruba and Igbo. And then how can we then further take into consideration some of the other local languages? So that's one of the key things at least one of the key things I wanted to stress and highlight during the development of this program. And I was very pleased to see that it was taken on quite positively by the government. And in June, we had the National Assessment Summit in Abuja. And this is where we brought together teachers, policy stakeholders, funders, and it was just a beautiful time of learning and exchanging different local stories to see how we can ensure that this national reading framework is eventually implemented. So we're still in the process of doing that. So the information that I'm providing to you now, it is something that is currently in development, and I am very excited to see over the next couple of months how this will progress. Now, that is at the policy level. So I think we need to really be cognizant and think about how we can ensure that we impact policy levels. Now, policy influences what we do at school. So at the school level, and some of the things, especially that I've been doing with the cadet program and also Africa Dyslexia Organization, we have one of the panelists here representing the ADO, is really providing that information to school teachers, to parents about what the science of reading actually looks like. And the science of reading takes into consideration looking at how we can make sure that it is evidence-based, and it's based on using a phonics-based approach, teaching students and improving the professional development of the teachers, because a lot of times, especially the context where I'm coming from. So I am originally from Jamaica. And when we look at the teacher training programs in Jamaica, but also in Nigeria, sometimes it's not getting the teachers sufficiently ready to take on the challenge of teaching young students using the science of reading. So a lot of the outreach initiatives that we've been doing is really to go ahead, provide this professional development to teachers, but also to parents. What can parents be doing at home? Some of the things that we talk about is really around this serve and return. So what we mean by serve and return is that a big part of reading development includes building students' oral language development. What are they saying, and so forth. So with serve and return, one of the easiest things parents can do is to have that back and forth conversation with their children. And so that builds the oral language development that we want to see. And even some of the things that I'm bringing into the National Reading Framework in Nigeria is collaborating with different, an initiative that's called Talk Together project. So this is based in where I'm working now in the University of Oxford. And one of the things with that project that I'm affiliated with is contextualizing assessments again. And so a big part of Talk Together is this building of oral language, having oral language development initiatives for teachers and for parents. And then the final thing now before I pass it over to my colleagues on the panel is really looking at this design. What do I mean by we spoke about making sure that we're okay at the policy level. We spoke about making sure everything is okay at the school level where teachers are equipped with the knowledge of the science of reading. But what can we do at the design level? So in addition to my work in the Department of Education, I am also a researcher in the Department of Computer Science. And I deliberately moved to the Computer Science department because everyone here today, I'm sure, knows we're living in this age of technology. Our students will be online, our children will be online. And so how can we ensure that we are designing in a way that takes into consideration some of the accessibility requirements for our children who would have dyslexia? Yes, we want to bring their reading skills up, but at the same time, I think there is a lot to do in terms of, from a regulation perspective, how we're designing in these online settings. So some of the things that I'm looking at is, in addition to teaching students how to read, we also have to think about the end goal of reading. What do we want students to be able to do? They should be able to understand at the end of this reading instruction. That's the purpose of learning how to read, being able to comprehend and understand information. So a lot of the things that I'm currently doing is when we're navigating these digital environments, when our students are online, how can we make sure that they're understanding very important materials? So one of the projects that I'm working on is when we go online, this is a very common example. When we go online and we're on our phones, for example, and we download an app and we have to read a terms and conditions document. Nobody reads that long document because it's very hard to understand. It is very important to understand what people are doing with our data online. This is a part of reading, and these are the types of requirements that our students will have to go forth and do in the world. That's why we're teaching them to read, to equip them to be able to be successful citizens in the world. And a part of that is understanding everything that they're doing. So some of the things I'm working on is in the Department of Computer Sciences, how can we design in a very accessible way where we're not only producing text information, we're providing it in a video form, building and strengthening speech recognition systems, some of the things, even technological devices. So an example that I'll end with before passing over to my colleagues is we have this, a technological tool called the CPEN, C-P-E-N, CPEN. And the whole idea is that when a student has a book and they just scroll, it's a technological, it looks like a pen, they scroll it over the lines of the book and it automatically uploads it and it reads it out to them if they need to hear it. So, and it can work in different alphabets, different language systems. So these are the types of things that I think we should be doing to be a little bit more accommodating alongside when we're developing this important skill of reading. There are other things that we can do to design to make life easier for students with dyslexia or differently abled students. So with that said, I did see some comments in the chat as I was going along, but in the meantime, while I bring up the comments, I'll take the time to introduce the persons on the panel. So I see the cameras turning on. Thank you. So we have Blessings, we have Edward, Rosalind, Latoya, and Vicky. So what I would like is, if before giving your overview, it would be lovely to hear a little bit more about you in terms of your background. And also I'm very excited to hear I know some of you already, and I am excited to learn about what others are doing. But for the benefit of our audience, it would be lovely just to provide a little overview of your background. And then I'm excited to hear and to learn from you on your particular topic. And then we'll get into a broader discussion with the questions. So I'll hand it over now to Blessing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sam. I wish you could go on and on and on and on, because you mentioned really very important things, and I'm super excited that these things have to do with my country. That means there is hope, and we have lots of answers and solutions coming for teachers. So my name is Blessing. I am a certified special needs educator with a special focus and passion in dyslexia. I have a passion for teaching children with dyslexia, and I think that goes back to, it takes my mind back to when I was much younger in school. This passion came as a result of when I got certified as a special needs teacher and I started working with children with dyslexia. I realized that I had some friends when I was younger who struggled a lot in school. And what you just mentioned, these teachers didn't understand what the problem was. And these kids kept being flogged. These kids kept being punished. And because I grew up in a school that is a community school and we all know each other, I look back at some of those kids who are now adults like me, and most of them had to drop out of school. And they dropped out of school because the teachers recommended that was the best thing for the kids. Like, this is not a school material kind of child, so they should go learn a trade or something. Well, some of them went over to learn a trade, but of course, those were teenagers at that point. Some of them, out of idleness, went into drugs, and for most of the ladies, got pregnant and had to get married. So when I got into the field of special education and started teaching different kids with special needs, I got particularly interested with dyslexia because it took my mind back. And like I would always say, I wouldn't have been able to help my peers then. But right now that I have this information, I can help as many children as possible by empowering teachers the best way I can do, and also teaching kids with dyslexia how to also read and comprehend effectively. So I do this through the Dyslexia Help Africa, where I create an awareness, and also through Dyslexia Help Learn Academy, where I also provide intervention for children with dyslexia. So I think I'll pause with the introductions here while every other person introduces themselves, or would you like me to continue?
Yeah, so I think you can continue, and then as each person comes on, just to give a brief overview of themselves. So you can continue, Blessing.
Okay, all right. So while thinking about this conference, I was also thinking along the lines of assessments, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Providing an assessment that is fair, an assessment that is reliable. I've had the opportunity to work with the Cadet Academy in screening children for dyslexia, and most of the materials we use are not materials created here. And when you also look at those materials, you know that it wasn't exactly created for the African context. So sometimes I help with the running of these assessments, and I will talk to my coach. I'll be like, I know what the results of this assessment is, but being someone who, took this assessment, I can tell that this doesn't really, represent the strengths of this child. I think this is somehow higher, maybe based on the curriculum or whatever strategies were put in place to put in that assessment. And I'm super excited that you have mentioned that with all that you're doing with the Nigerian government, we're going to have something that is more fair and something that is also more reliable. Because usually when you meet parents or teachers and they mention that their kids are struggling, the next question is, how do we know? How do we place this child? What assessment tool do we use? And most of these assessment tools, as mentioned earlier, are also psychological. I think, was it Dr. Midwest that mentioned that, or Dr. Peak? Okay, I can't remember. But I've also seen lots of assessment because parents have come over to me and to help their kids. And I would ask, have you run a dyslexia assessment? And when they bring in the material, it is psychological. And the parents will look at it. I'm like, okay, so what can you tell me about this? And they really can't say anything. They say, I don't know what is written there. I don't know what the assessment is about. So it is also very important that we have assessment that teachers can also translate, that when they look at these assessment reports, they can know that, okay, this is what this child is struggling with. It is not okay to just say a child is dyslexic or a child is struggling with reading. It is very important to pinpoint the things that these kids are struggling with and how you can help them. So a proper assessment should be able to pinpoint all of these struggles and should also be able to pinpoint some of the solutions that teachers can use. Because when you talk about reading, and just as Dr. Peak mentioned earlier about data collection, when you have all of this data, there are also some strategies that teachers can start using in their classroom that can help these kids, meaning they don't have to always wait until a professional, in quote, is able to pick the baton and help the kids. And I believe that when we provide this assessment, especially here in the African context, they should be simplified, very simplified in such a way that any school teacher can pick it up, can read the assessment, can understand the assessment, and will know what to start doing, because we don't have lots of professionals here who can attend to all of these kids. So a regular classroom teacher should be able to pick up an assessment report, looking at that report, should be able to know what they can start doing to help these children. Because how many professionals do we have right now who can give help to these kids? Currently, I'm here in the city of Abuja, but you have lots of kids from different parts of the country who need help. And that was why we also started the online intervention, so that we can have more kids who can get access to this. So Yes, I think I've spoken enough. Let me pause here for more people to talk before I continue. Thank you, Dr. Samantha.
Thank you so much, Blessing. I do have a couple questions, and everyone, please feel free to post your questions in the chat. But before I raise my questions, I just want to welcome as well. I see that Edward and Latoya and Vicky are also on the session as well. I'm just gonna ask you to jump in here to introduce yourselves. So let's start with Vicky.
All right, thank you, Dr. Sam. Good evening, everyone. Hope you can all hear me.
Yes, yes.
I'm speaking live from the city of Abuja, Nigeria. And I'm so excited to be on this platform with amazing individuals. Okay, so a little bit about me. Currently, what I do is I'm a school director in an inclusive elementary school. I also run an organization that is focused on providing training solutions and other special education services to children who are ailing academically. And I also run a support group for mothers, specifically mothers. And someone is like, why mothers? I think I connect better to their struggles. I think I connect better to their journey. You know, whenever I call for IEP meetings or convene IEP meetings or so many things, you just see the mothers show up. Mothers give up, sometimes give up their career, switch careers, you know, just so they can be there for their children. And that's why I feel like they need a lot of support. That's actually the weaker vessel, biblically the weaker vessel. So I think we need all the support. Women empowering women. So personally, I love to teach. And I'm one of those individuals who went to the university to study something just because my parents said, you can do this, okay? So I was done with it and handed them the certificate, like, hey, you said I should do this, I did it, here's your certificate. And I move on to do something that I'm passionate about, because while doing what my parents wanted me to do, I discovered who I was. I discovered my passion, and others helped me discover myself. And thereafter, I moved into education. I went for my postgraduate diploma in education, and currently running my master's degree program in early childhood and special education. That's because I'm passionate about early childhood education, which is the foundation for all of this. If we get it right, in early childhood, then we would succeed at, you know, curbing a lot of issues when the children are older. So I'm so passionate about educating the young child, young learners, and which is why I'm so excited about the elementary school. And so what I want to talk about is going to come from that perspective, you know, based on the people I deal with, what I do. It's about teachers. I'm very big on teacher training, and I know that a couple of teachers would have loved to be here, but for some technological reasons, financial reasons, they're not here. So the first question is, how do we intend to reach out to these teachers? We are here. Are we going to keep this information we've loaded ourselves with just here? We need to make plans to share. And so this boils down to the multiplier effect. So I'm encouraging teachers here, when you resume for the new academic session, there's something I love to do, you know, at the school. Every month, try to organize mini sessions, pick a topic, check what the teachers are struggling with. It can start with everyone, anyone at the school level, you know. Pick a struggle and try to address it in a mini training session that could just be like 30 to 45 minutes. It doesn't have to be complicated with the slides and everything, we understand, but we must propagate this good news. We must continue to spread the word at the grassroots, you know, gradually we get to the level we want to get to. So this culture of not exposing or availing ourselves to training opportunities is a big concern. Some teachers get the job just to get paid at the end of the month. Okay, we're told to design our lesson plans, we're told to fill in our register, we're told to do this, we're told to do that. Everyone just wants to fulfill righteousness. So this is me telling teachers, you know, based on what I encounter every term in different schools, because I am privileged and have that opportunity to consult with various schools. So talking from my interactions, observations, you know, I would like to encourage teachers, when you teach your children in your class, there is, we have diaries here, Dr. Sam. We have something called diaries. So at the end of the week, teachers are made to enter what they taught the children. So some teachers just enter, they just fill the column for that week based on what is on the scheme of work. So that's for schools that run the scheme of work thing, that try to follow it to the letter. It doesn't matter if the children understand. The scheme of work said we should teach this for week 1, teach this for week 2. And so when it's time to enter the information into the diary, they just try to make it tally with what is on the scheme of work, regardless of what they taught in class. Then there is another case of the communication books. Okay, we have those daily logs. However you communicate home, however you get the parents involved, emails, books, you must ensure that it's about the child. So some teachers over time have used the communication book as a way of reporting their class activities. So you find a child's communication log talking about what the teacher did and not what the child benefited, not the challenges the child encountered, not what the child learned, not what the child discovered, not the new things you discovered about the child. You know, this would help parents. So when we begin to talk about learning disabilities, it starts with these little things. So when we can't gather data, because if we're waiting for some exquisite, you know, kind of data to fall from heaven, it begins with us. It can't happen that way. So it begins from this communication logs you use every day. Why am I talking about communication log? I was opportune to be in a meeting where this parent was told that, hey, it seems your child has this autism. It seems your child has learning disability. It seems your child has this, that. The parents were actually ready to sue the school. Their argument was based on the fact that the child's communication log, daily communication log, it's a daily communication log, it's not a weekly thing. They argued that every information stated in that log does not point in the direction of their child's deficiencies. So how was the school going to justify what they were telling them? So that was a big issue. And so that's, these are some of the real life situations where I draw lessons from and spread. And I say, see, we have to get this right. We have to get this right. Don't gang up some teachers and say, we're going to tell the parents this, we're going to tell the parents that. These are very relatable things I'm talking about. I don't like to talk, I think maybe because of the teaching profession, I like to come really basic with my explanations and, you know, things I talk about so we can all relate to it. Then I know that teachers are concerned. How much am I even paid at the end of the month? Why should I be bothered about a child whose parents are not making conscious effort to support? Why should I stress myself? Am I done with these 13 kids in class and just one child is there? Come on. If at the end of the day anything happens, blah, 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 it's just one. There's nothing to be worried about, you know? I think we need to readdress that mentality. Every child matters. Every child is important. And like I always say, the success of that child, you never know where it will catapult you to. Just that child could change your entire future. I'm a Christian, so when I look at the lost sheep, they were 100. One got missing. What happened? The shepherd went after one. So you must be focused on that child who seems lost in class. It's important. That's the heart. That's the heart that shows, that's the action that shows you have a heart that cares. Okay. Another thing is volunteering. Do not wait for paid jobs. If you need to understand learning disabilities, you can volunteer to work in special needs centers, schools, just try to amass as much information as you can about these conditions, because when you say, I want to take up a training program so I can understand it, just like Coach Lola said, you need hands-on experience with these children. And sometimes it's difficult for you to understand some theoretical things if you haven't even at least volunteered. And that's if the theoretical aspect of your learning will still lead you to a practicum. So it's both ways. You just, either you give yourself the opportunity or you enroll for a program that gives you an opportunity to work hands-on with these children. Yeah, and then just so I don't take so much of our time, to school owners, be open-minded. I'm a school leader, I'm a school owner, so I can relate. They can be very dogmatic. This is not working. Can we review it? It's an issue. I've had teachers speak with me and say, my boss is this, my boss is that. They're not budging. What do we do? It's time for school owners to, if you're a school owner here, please talk to other school owners. Means we need to encourage one another. School owners to school owners, because if a teacher tries to talk to her boss, it's going to look like, oh, are you trying to tell me you know more than me? I employed you. I'm gonna fire you. You know, to avoid things like that, school owners should take it upon themselves to talk to fellow school owners so that these issues can be addressed. There are so many things out there that we can just like Ms. Blessing said, we can find ways to support our children. If you don't understand those standardized testing tools, especially because sometimes we can't relate them to our client, you can adapt them to suit what we're facing here and get the results that you desire. So I would have loved to go on, but I'd like to pause here so the next person can speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Vicky. And I really love the point that you made around every child matters. It reminds me of, this idea of every child can learn, every child must learn. So thanks for that. And I'm really excited to get into the discussion bit. So we'll invite Edward, and then I think I still see LaToya here. So we'll invite them each to speak for 10 minutes. And then before we get into our wider discussion. All right, so over to you, Edward.
Thank you very much, Dr. Johnson, and thank you, Vicky. I think your presentation leads right into where I want to go. Dr. Johnson did speak a lot about the policies and the great work that she's doing in Nigeria, but I want to come at it from the perspective of a parent advocate, and also as someone who has worked in the field for a while. Just by way of introduction, I'm a doctoral student, hopefully wrapping up soon. And my research interests are in working with children with autism. I've done that over a number of years now, about 10 to 15 years now. And I'm interested in AAC, which are alternative and augmentative devices. So these are devices that children with complex communication needs use to communicate. I'm also interested in the assessment and treatment of challenging behaviors in kids with autism. So just by way of introduction. But I do want to come at it from a parent advocate perspective, and also from as somebody from Ghana, how we see disability as Africans. And I think, Vicky talked about every child matters and the importance of early childhood education. You see, it is very common that we hear words like, and I think it probably is also common in Nigeria, if you've heard about people calling others dumb, or I think in our language we say mumu, or people calling others that, are you blind, can't you see? Or these are everyday words that we use in our conversations. But the problem is that if I am, blind, or if I'm a person with vision impairment, or I have a child or a family member, a close relation that has that disability, it's not something that will sit very well with me. And so I would not like for you to use those words to describe other individuals. And so that is something that I hope that as these conversations keep going on, we'll be able to pay a lot more attention to that. The fact that the everyday language that we use, how we refer to people with disabilities, how we use quote unquote derogatory words or languages to refer to them, how that perpetuates the stigma and the discrimination that persons with disabilities experience in our communities. And unfortunately for us, we are still, well, there's a lot of great work that is being done, but we are still very much so in the era where we see disability as present in the individual. I'll touch briefly on the medical model and then the social model of disability. And those are models that some of you would have been familiar with. And so for the medical model, we know people that have diabetes, hypertension, cancer, a lot of medical conditions, right? Now, these are conditions that those individuals have to carry with them. But then those are conditions that are not visible, right? So those are conditions that are not visible. And then there are individuals, maybe somebody using a wheelchair, or somebody with autism, or somebody with a learning disability. Learning disability, most of the time, you will not see the manifestation until you maybe have the individual, maybe a physical manifestation of the disability, until you have them work on a task or on a functional task. And so the way that we treat persons with diabetes, we understand that it's a disease, and we understand that there's empathy, and we understand that there are processes for them to seek help. Now, when it comes to an individual, say, using a wheelchair, or somebody that is maybe making quote unquote distracting noises in the community, we treat them differently because we have been taught to understand that that behavior is not acceptable. But then for most of us, and even so now that I'm speaking, there are many times that most of us would, when we are speaking, would maybe have a pen and we'll keep clicking whilst we are speaking, or we'll keep tapping on a table, or tapping our feet, or maybe we are fidgeting with our hands. But then when we see a kid that is maybe flapping their hands, or we see a kid that is making maybe quote unquote distracting noises, we think of that behavior as unacceptable. And so it is something that all of us has to come to accept that now all of us are one big human race, and we are on different spectrums of the race. So we have different behavior sets, and the way that our behaviors manifest are different. And so persons with disabilities sometimes might need a little bit more help. They might need accommodations. They might need a little bit more support in order to get them to where, or get them to do what they have to do. And so that is where I want to draw our minds to this morning, that we have to come to a place as a country, Nigeria as a country, Ghana as a continent, to accept disability, and to understand that, if my child is 2 years old, or my child is 2.5, 3 years old, and they haven't said a word, and or I see that they are not, engaging in certain milestones, developmental milestones that they are supposed to engage in, it is okay to seek help. It is okay to reach out to the school district. It is okay to to talk to family members, to talk to friends. It is okay to ask questions. It's okay to pray. It's great to pray, but then it is okay to seek help. It is okay to be out there and talk about those things. And so early intervention, the earlier we do some of those things, the better we set those kids up for success later on in their life. There are three things as I wrap up, three things that I want to touch on briefly. So for us to be able to have these kind of conversations, all of us has to be allies, and there's a lot of us on here. The participation is really encouraging. There's a lot of us on here, and all of us can be allies to this community. We can be friends to this community. That means we are doing our bit to this community to engage, to promote this kind of discussions, to promote this kind of conversations. So at the individual level, it is okay to ask questions. It's okay to ask, what should I do? It's okay to ask, what should I say? Or how can I refer to you? Or what should I call you? What should I name your disability? It's okay to ask questions. And it's okay to talk about individuals with disabilities, individuals with learning disabilities, or what kind of disabilities that they have. It's also important for us to pay attention to the language that we use, that I've referred to, I've talked about before: lame, calling people lame, calling people, dumb, crazy. These are words that we think are everyday languages, but then these are words that do hurt persons in the disability community. At the group level, and this comes in our schools, it comes in organizations like the Cadet Academy and many other organizations that are, helping push this forward. We can help provide resources to deal with the functional limitations that individuals deal with. And this is what the policy work is pushing toward. I understand the difficulty and how frustrating it can be in our community, because we are still looking at disability from a medical lens that we don't think it's a social problem. We think that it's a problem that the family has. We don't think that these individuals can contribute to society. And that's why it's important for all of us at the individual level to voice our opinion, to volunteer, to be out there, to engage in these kind of conversations, to help push us from that individual level to the group level, where we are doing things right to kind of help deal with some of the challenges that we see these individuals face. So if it's providing resources to help kids with disabilities succeed in school, well, maybe you might not have the technical knowledge, but you might have something else. You might be able to buy a set of books, or you might be able to contribute your energies toward helping an academy that is running a place for persons with disabilities. And by so doing, you're also learning about that community. You're getting close and learning about how you can help and support. And then there is the systemic level. And I think Dr. Johnson touched on that. At the systemic level, we are supposed to help, when we engage in these conversations, it helps push and come up with policies that will help change the whole system. And over here, I'm in Texas right now. Over here in the US, they've come a long way from the Americans with Disability Act to the IDEA, where you support kids from 0 to 3 or 3 to 21 years of age. The Section 503. There's a lot of laws that support persons with disabilities. I did look up Nigeria, and I know there's a policy act, 2017 or 2018 in Ghana. I know we had a parliament enact a law in 2006, but these are just pretty big frameworks that do speak about speak against discriminating persons with disability right from the UN Charter, from the UN, United Nations. But then it's important for us to also push for inclusion, push for the inclusion of persons with disabilities in the educational system, that they have the right to an education the same way that a child with, a neurotypical child, a typical child, has the right to an education. And so at the individual level, we don't have to stop talking, we have to keep talking. At the group level, volunteer, learn about the disability community, engage in parent meetings, join parent meetings, form committees, engage in on the school campuses, academic committees, or form committees amongst various teachers to learn about disabilities. And then at the systemic level, to lobby government, to lobby governors, to lobby parliamentarians to enact these kind of laws, because really a lot of the changes, when we want to see broad changes, that is where it's going to happen. And so hopefully this is a conversation that we can keep going. Hopefully all of us will not stop at this conference after this conference is over, but we will help push forward that conversation to ensure equity in service provision for all persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edward. Very, very inspiring delivery in the presentation and just the content of the presentation as well. And I I think we can get a bit into the discussion, which I'm not seeing Latoya on call. If she's able to rejoin, then we will get a sense of her background as well. But I think I'll, in the interest of time as well, I'll jump in and also say to everyone, please feel free to put your questions in the chat. I was just going to the chat just a while ago just to get a sense of the thread of the conversation. I haven't seen any questions, but based on the comments that I've seen, there's really this theme around early intervention. And I think for each of the panelists here, we've touched upon that a bit. I remember particularly, Edward, you mentioned that earlier on in the start of your talk, and with Blessing and Vicky, and I'm particularly excited even to hear about the work of Vicky, when you said that you work with mothers, and Blessing as well with the assessment literacy parts of things. So this is a common thread that's coming out in terms of early intervention is the best. And I guess what one of the things that came to my mind while Edward, while you were speaking, is how we also conceptualize and think about disability, because particularly in the African context, and it was very I started to reminisce also on some of the experiences that I have had growing up in Jamaica, and also doing some outreach work in Africa around the use of derogatory terms. I know in Jamaica, for example, we use a streaming approach. I'm not sure if streaming is still done in Nigeria or in other parts of Africa, where students are placed in grades based on their ability. And I know that there are some classes that are called last brightest. So even language like that can really defeat the well-being of our students. And we know from a psychological perspective, we want to help the student to self-actualize, to become the best versions of themselves. But at the very basic level, we have to think about their psychological well-being. So I wondered, any of the panelists, I know Edward, you touched upon it, but Vicky or Blessing, do you have any thoughts around that in your work? How have you been able to address that in terms of this point that Edward raised, the important point around how we conceptualize disability, and that again can influence, early intervention?
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks so much, sir. When he started, I remember an experience I had few days back when I was on a podcast, and the lady interviewing me asked a question. The podcast is actually in Pidgin English, and she said, "What's dyslexia in Pidgin English?" And immediately she said that the thoughts that came to my head are all of the negative words I've heard people refer to kids with disabilities, especially those with dyslexia. Like you mentioned, some mumu, olodo, if you're Yoruba, you know that, or Nigerians, you know them. So be putting them down in the chat because you hear a lot of them. And when it comes to dyslexia, I was also thinking about teachers, importance of teachers also understanding the culture where we are in, because usually when you tell a parent that their child is dyslexic or their child has dyslexia, I'm surprised to have noticed that most parents think dyslexia is a spiritual issue. If I hadn't come hand in hand with some of these parents, I would say this was just a lie. But I remember a particular parent then at the Cadet Academy said this child wasn't going to be in school today, and we're like, why? And it was because we were going to be taking the child to a spiritual house for prayers. And we noticed that during the stay of that child, she was always being taken to different spiritual houses for prayers. So we still need more awareness on people to really understand what this disability is all about, what this difficulty is all about, because most parents don't understand. And usually when you also say you tell the parent that their child is dyslexic, it's also important as teachers or professionals, especially in the African context, that you let them understand that it is not a death sentence. And that is why when I talk about dyslexia, I love to always start with the strengths. I love to always start with the positive part, because usually when you just start with, okay, your child can read, or this, that, they just feel, oh, okay, my child is stupid. And there is nothing that I can do that can help my child. And also one other area that I believe usually helps when I'm talking with parents and working with them is giving examples of successful dyslexic, but not just successful dyslexic, but African successful dyslexic. And that is why I'm always in search of Africans, especially Nigerians who are dyslexic, they are doing amazing work. Because on a general term, when you bring in stories of international dyslexics who are not African or not Nigerian, the parent will tell you that it's because they are not here in Africa. It's because they got their education over there abroad. So there is support, there is help there. So that's why they turned out well. But here in Africa, here in Nigeria, their child can turn out well because all of those services are not here. But when we're able to give examples of people who might not be popular, because I know we know lots of very popular dyslexics, right? But there are dyslexics amongst us as well who might not be as popular as other people are, but they are doing amazing work. You know, I have Rosalind is here, and I'm happy she's going to be speaking as well. I have Doni. You can name lots of them who they might not be popular on the international board, the same way we call all of the actors, movies, directors, those in sports. But then we have these people here amongst us who they can actually relate to their story. I mean, I grew up also here in Africa, like when Rosalind talks about her story of how she had to struggle until she was 18. No, I think her dyslexia was diagnosed well into her life as an adult. But look at the amazing work she's doing, you know, and if Rosalind doesn't even tell you she's dyslexic, she's struggling with a difficulty, you wouldn't even know. So some of these examples give parents hope, especially here in our culture, to understand that these kids can learn, and that my child is dyslexic doesn't mean it's the end of your life. So that's what I'll have to add on that. Thank you so much, Dr. Samantha.
Yeah, and I think it's particularly important, especially the point that you made, Blessing, around this idea. It's important to take care of the well-being, and particularly when you think about the conceptualization of dyslexia or disabilities, more broadly speaking, if it is that a child is taken out of school or they're not provided with the correct intervention, then of course we're not going to receive data on the student, and we know that data is quite important to progress, figure out where students are, where they need to be, and what do we need to do to fill that gap. And this is why I want to bring Vicky back into the conversation now, because Vicky, I remember you mentioned around these communication logs, and oftentimes the logs are not being properly taken care of. Usually it should be a daily log, but instead teachers are implementing sort of a weekly log instead. So could you share a little bit more about that, Vicky? That point was very interesting and quite relevant to the whole idea of making sure that we have enough data about students who have disabilities.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Sam. Valuable information being shared here. Yes, I am very big on communication. If you see something, say something. I just like Ms. Blessing said, I have a parent as well in my school who thinks that it's a spiritual problem because the child, upon discovering this child has dyslexia, she said she saw it in her dream. She saw a dark cloud. It was hair. It was, things like that. And for such parents, it will take a lot of talking and, and carrying along, because it's not just about, no, it's not spiritual, it's not this, it's not that. Maybe she didn't have data to help her come to that realization that this is what her child is struggling with, because when the facts are there. Now, some parents, when they see that the facts are actually there, they're like, no, but they keep finding, one excuse or the other. And we have teachers who are like, if the children in my class are not doing well, because they feel like a child's excellence at school boils down to the A's and the B's. So what these teachers do is there is a misrepresentation of the child's effort. Whatever activities that lead up to that grading, is not just properly represented. And so at the end of the day, you see a wrong reflection of what the child has done at the end of the day. So if a child is constantly making A's, and even in English language or literacy, and you come at the end of the day to say, this child seems to have this, that, it's a problem. So that's still record. That is still record. Because over time, one of the data you eventually use to inform your decision-making and intervention and whatsoever boils down to the child's cumulative reports over time. So if these reports are conflicting or there are discrepancies, it's hard to bring the parents to that place of conviction that there is need to, so they could tell you, no, but from the previous school, this was what it was. And even here, at some point, and that means the teacher is not doing her job. This is just a call for us to be a bit more disciplined in our profession. We're not saying make the children fail so it's easy for you to convince the parents, but we're just saying have alternate ways of assessing these children so you can have data gathered from different dimensions, including your daily communication log. As a matter of fact, your daily communication log is almost like your alibi. In case you're being accused of something, it comes to your rescue. It's in print, and it's in such a way that you speak, the parents speak. And if the parent is confused, you can go on to clarify, just dispel all of that doubt and everything. You have that constant interaction with the parents there. Now, I'm not an advocate of teachers having phone conversations with parents, because it's going to be war of words. This is another dimension to all of this. It's going to be war of words. So if you come to me and you say, I said, no, you said there's a problem, we don't have it recorded. So the information you put in the daily communication log or through emails or however you do it is for everyone's use. At the end of the day, we get facts to work with. In the end, it's in the best interest of the child. It's in the best interest of the child. So someone was asking a question about extracurricular activities. I don't know, maybe I need to check that question again. Dr. Sam, could you help me with that? So
yes, before we get to that question though, Vicky, I just wanted to extend that a bit, because I think your response answers Blessing's question really well in terms of whether or not early intervention is ever too late for somebody later on in life. So just to is early intervention is key. Do you think it's ever too late to intervene in the life of a nonverbal child? What is the best approach to intervening or helping such a child become verbal to some extent in our society? And I think what you just mentioned there really starts a conversation off quite well in that area, because it goes back to this idea of having that log of what the student has done. Yes, the student is nonverbal, but there are certain things that you can keep a note of. You can make note of the student's particular behavior, actions, to see if there are any sort of progress on a day-to-day basis. And the answer is yes, it's never too late. So it's never too late, but it always depends upon having suitable data to then say, okay, what is it that we need to do? Because in order for you to, it doesn't make any sense we implement something that won't address the specific needs of that particular student. And this is why data is so important. And one of the things that we're doing in the policy work with the government, we're developing this online management system for Nigeria to ensure that the teachers have that access to the dashboard, but instead of having, what we just mentioned into the diaries, where it can be quite paper-based, they can actually have it in a more electronic format, and this can be shared in a more decentralized manner. Parents now have access to this information in a timely manner. So no, it's never too late, but we do need data. And also the question, Vicky, you mentioned, yes, somebody was asking around this extracurricular activities. I'm just trying to find this question, but essentially the question was centered around, I believe, strategies for successful examples of extracurricular activities.
Yes, talking about extracurricular activities, you know, when you walk into a typical school, a typical conventional school, and you walk to the timetable of activities, you see it's all sit and learn, sit and learn. There is very little time for these children to have some form of extracurricular activities or co-curricular activities embedded in between learning hours. So some of these things come after school hours when maybe some persons are not available to be part of it. So maybe I would like to take it from the angle of what you can do within school hours. So like I would say always, it's important to know the children in your class. What I did in my own space was that in order to put these kids in, activities I felt like they would be, perform well at, I mean, extracurricular activities, I directed their teachers to find out. What the teachers didn't know was that I was trying to get them to have their eyes on more details about their children, about the learners in their classroom, find out more about your learners, Okay, I can hear myself and I can see someone's screen. It would be nice if, I think there's an interference and it's giving me a fallback. If the person can mute their mic, and so I can just continue.
Hear you clearly.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good now. Yeah.
All right. So I told the teachers, find out what you think your learner can do well other than academics. And so that way we can group them. So we're not, because when you're working with children, you have to identify interest, what motivates them, what excites them. If you're not interested in something, then you're not going to put your attention to it. So when we talk about attention, it's tied to interest as well. So depending on the child's interest, you can craft activities, you can design activities. So let whatever you do at the school level be based on what the children need, what they are interested in. So I wouldn't just particularly say activity. So there are tons of co-curricular activities or extracurricular activities, yoga, Scrabble. Yeah, there are children who can do well with that. ICT, there are dyslexics who are awesome with ICT, robotics and all that. So you can begin to, come up with ideas based on what you think the learners in the school, that depends on the size of the school, what you think they can do, and that would work. That would actually work for everyone. Yeah, I see someone saying yoga. Yoga is a great one, a mindful exercise, mindfulness exercise. That's pretty good. Allows you to, reflect and just be peaceful, just be calm, think about something beautiful. Yes, there are tons of activities, but before you choose an activity, please consider your learners. What would work for them? It's not just about a menu of activities. I think that's what I will have to, that would be my submission on that.
Thank you so much for that, Vicky. And I'm really enjoying the discussion. I know we're constrained by time, but I just wanted to ask also Edward. I remember you mentioned something along the lines of you do some work in technology as well, and considered whether or not you had any sort of thoughts around different tools that we might bring into this conversation to achieve, just successful well-being outcomes for persons with disabilities.
The technologies that I research on AAC, so augmentative and alternative communication devices. So these are devices that have been programmed to help kids with complex communication needs. So that could be kids that, it doesn't just have to be kids, really, just individuals, persons that have difficulty using natural speech. Natural speech, and then also that have difficulty with understanding natural speech. They can be quite expensive. They can be pretty expensive, and even here in the US, you do have to fight quite a bit in order to have access for your child to use one of those devices. There are state agencies that have been mandated to loan some of these devices out. But then for the context that we are dealing in Nigeria, in Africa per se, there are apps out there that, and I can compile some of those apps and send them to to Lola to disseminate to others. Some of these are free apps, but then there are restrictions on how on what kind of what you can use them for, because you have to pay in order to access certain parts of the apps. But these are essentially just communication devices that do help individuals communicate. So with a child that has difficulty maybe making a request and would hold your hand and draw you to maybe the kitchen instead of telling you, I want this, they're able to tap on the app, and then that will help them communicate that content. And the research shows that the more that you use AAC devices, it supports the development of natural speech. So it's not there to replace natural speech. It supports the development of natural speech. So that is very, very specific. But then that's an app that is available to those individuals that need those kind of help. When it comes to the general sense of apps or technology devices that supports persons with learning disabilities or in disabilities as a whole, I'm sure you're very, very familiar with all this text-to-speech and all this learning technology apps that do support individuals that have learning disabilities. I'm not exactly sure how far the research is or how far we use those kind of technologies in Africa, but those will be something that will be more appropriate to say individuals with learning disabilities per se. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Edward, and thank you so much for panelists. And I think addressing the point around finances, funding is always needed, and so this is why we need to ensure that this is a big topic, or at least one of the top 3 things we talk about with funding agencies when they come to do these sorts of initiatives in different countries. With that said, I know we didn't get through every question, and I was trying to type as I went along to address as many questions as possible, but I want to take the time to just appreciate everyone who joined today with the engagement, and of course to our very knowledgeable panelists. Really enjoyed hearing about your backgrounds and also the wonderful work that you're doing, and just wanted to wish you all the best as we embark and continue on this journey of making sure that we create more inclusive environments for students with disabilities. So thank you again, everyone, and I'll pass it over now to Coach Lola.
Wow. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to the lead panelists, most especially Dr. Samantha. We truly appreciate your collaboration with the Cadet Academy, for all the support. Thank you, Ms. Vicky. Thank you, Edward. Thank you also, Ms. Blessing. It's been a time of learning for me, and I believe it's the same for everyone who is on this call. So real quick, now we need to move on to the next agenda. We're about to run up. We'll be off this call in the next, within 20 minutes maximum. I want to keep to time. I see a raise of hands, and I would appreciate it if that person could please type out whatever the question is, because we looked through all the questions and they've all been answered. So if there's any question, yes, give the emojis up for our panelists. They've done an amazing job. Thank you for all the great works you're doing in the field. We truly appreciate you. Now it's time for us to move to the section, which is the Global Inclusive Education Virtual Summer Camp Teachers and Parents Award presentation, proudly the Cadet Academy in partnership with the Nestle Learning. You all know what it's all about. You've all been you've nominated, and there were different criteria we looked at for the winners to be chosen. So I'm going to keep mute right now while I invite Mrs. Adelola George, who is one of the panelists to make this announcement and the presentation of the awards. Thank you. George, we can't see your video. I see you on the call and you're muted. So just please give me a minute to reach out to Ms. Adelola George. I don't know what's going on, but she'll be with us in a few couple of seconds, I believe.
Hello. Oh, I'm so sorry. I stood up to get something. All right, I'm here.
Okay, I'm sure you all had our conversation. She'll be with us within a couple of seconds. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I don't know how it happened that I missed it when you called me, because I've been following keenly. Can you hear me well?
Loud and clear.
One second. All right, so I'm back. All right, hello, everyone. So it's been, first of all, I want to thank everybody who has nominated someone for these awards. And there are 4 categories of awards. I'm going to read them out. 1 second, please. I have it open. Yeah. Okay, I can't find it. All right, so we run the different categories. So the first category is category 1, which is a diamond category, and it's for a school that has shown tremendous support for children with special needs. This school is limited because they provide academic support and advocacy for students who receive special education. And today, the school that will be getting this award, let me tell you what they will be getting. They'll be getting a school-wide license to 2 nursing products for up to 50 students. And the name of this school is in 𝘼𝙒𝙼𝙖𝙒. And I hope I call it right, because I'm assuming, I hope I do. It's called Florentine Montessori School. I just want to put it in the chat room. Please show them some love as I call out the winners of these different awards. Florentine Montessori School. Is there anybody from Florentine who is here who can show the chat room that they are excited to get the award? And at this point, I think I'll just tell you, if you nominate someone, you better confirm that they are here, that they are, because they don't want to miss out on hearing their name.
We are here.
Congratulations, Florentine School. You have a license for 2 products of Nestle. And I mean, I can bet that you will really benefit your school, not just the children with special needs, but all the children, because the things that as it benefits the children with learning difficulties, will also benefit the neurotypical children. All right, the second category is the gold prize, and it's for a teacher. If you're a teacher in the house, please show some love, make some noise in the chat room. Make some noise, chat something, say that you're excited to be here, if you're a teacher. And this teacher is someone, let me tell you what makes that person deserve this award. This is an educator. They could be better educators. They could also be general education teachers. They could be therapists. But what is important is that they have been innovative and outstanding in their service and support to advance the success of inclusive and special education. And today, I mean, despite we had such, I mean, it was a contention, but we're excited to announce the person who is winning this gold prize. And his name is, I hope it's a he or her, their name, we are in the gender neutral generation, so their name is 𝘼𝙒𝙼𝙐𝙎 𝘼𝙒𝙼𝙐𝙎 is the winner for the Gold Awards. Please celebrate him in the chat room. Or her, please, if you are here or her, please mention in the chat so I will know what I'm saying is right. Okay, let's move on to the third category, which is the silver category. This person is also an educator. Teachers are winning here, right? And this teacher is someone who has also done the same thing. Oh, I didn't mention what 𝑘𝑠𝑙 will be winning $500 or its equivalent in Naira, because obviously it's in Nigeria, and a free license to one Nestle product. Let me be sure that I got it right. Yes. But the next person will be winning $200 and a free license to one Nestle product. And that person has also shown shown outstanding support and has been innovative in their support of children with special needs. You want to trust that the people you nominated, this was the criteria that you followed to nominate them, because they have shown tremendous support for children with special needs and they support inclusive education in their own way. All right, and this person is also from Uyo in 𝘼𝙒𝙼𝙐𝙼𝙐, Nigeria, and this person's name is 𝙚𝙼𝙒𝙼𝙐𝙎𝙀. Please put your hands together, show them some love in the chat room. And finally, everybody say finally. I want to see finally in the chat room. Finally. This particular one brings a lot of joy, because living in Nigeria, you know that a lot of parents are very silent about having children with special needs. But these parents is not only not silent, but they're not only advocating for their child, they're also advocating for all children with special needs, especially those around them, speaking up wherever they are and supporting other parents. They do that through their social media, they do that traditionally by just talking to people, they are part of parents training, they support school programs, they volunteer, they are there. And let me tell you something, all these parents that we have seen that were nominated were mostly nominated by teachers. Teachers see what you're doing. If you're a parent and you are here, know that teachers see what you are doing. If you don't care about your child, they see it. If you care about your child, they see it. And if you care about other children, too, they see it. So please put this in mind as you speak to other parents so that everybody's seeing what you're doing. And today, our parents' name is, please, I want you to roll it before I say it. Are you rolling it? All right, her name is, okay, one second, let me be sure, let me confirm the pronunciation before I mess up. I'm practicing it since so.
Okay, so
all right, so her name is 𝘼𝙒𝙼𝙐𝙼𝙐𝙎. I hope I got it. Did I get it right? Mrs. 𝘼𝙒𝙼𝙐𝙼 is the parent for the Brown Heart Prize. I want to congratulate everyone who has won these awards today, and everyone who was nominated. The reason you were nominated was because someone somewhere is seeing you, seeing your work, seeing your labor. So don't keep up the good work, and definitely your reward is certain. Congratulations, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, and congratulations to everyone who was nominated in the first place, and to the winners. We appreciate you. Keep up the good work. I want to also acknowledge and thank Ms. Dorcas 𝘼𝙒𝙼𝙍 for the sign language interpretation. We truly appreciate you. Thank you for making this program truly inclusive. Over to you, to our able Ms. Susan Iliad.
Thank you so much, Lola. Thank you, everyone. As we draw the curtains on this illuminating experience, I do want to extend our sincerest gratitude to each and every one of you for being a part of the Global Inclusive Education Summer Camp 2023. Our theme, Understanding Learning Disabilities in Cultural Context, has brought together passionate individuals who are dedicated to the cause of inclusive education. A heartfelt thank you goes out to our distinguished speakers whose insights have enriched our discussions and expanded our horizons. Your expertise and commitment will certainly propel us to foster a more inclusive world. We also extend our appreciation to our moderators who skillfully guided our discussions, and to our dedicated rapporteurs. Your contributions have ensured that every perspective was heard and valued. Behind the scenes, our dedicated tech directors and tech support, you worked tirelessly to ensure a flawless execution of our virtual summit. Thank you. And a special acknowledgement to our co-convener, Tiffany James, and our moderator and convener, the one and only Mrs. 𝘼𝙒𝙼𝙍𝘼𝙎. Your vision, dedication, and unwavering efforts in bringing this summit to life are truly commendable, Lola. Your commitment to advancing inclusive education certainly shines brightly. We express our heartfelt gratitude to our valued partner, 𝘼𝙒 Learning, for their unwavering support and collaboration with the Cadet Academy. As we conclude this summit, let's carry forward the insights gained, connections made, and the commitment to inclusive education, championing the cause of global inclusive education. I am Susan Ilian, and it is my pleasure to serve as your MC for this exceptional event. Until we meet again, please stay connected, stay inspired. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for being here. See you next time. Thank you so very much. Look out for our programs, our events, and everything will be dishing out. Thank you for the support. Please go ahead. Just go on social media and put out points you've learned, and above all, implement. Thank you so very much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Love you all. Thanks for
Thank
sharing
you.
Saturday evening with us.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, unmute yourself.
Thank you
Say
so
something to
much.
someone.
Thank you, Coach Lola. Thank you,
Love you.
Cadet.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you,
Thank you,
𝘼𝙒.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Lola.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
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 We gon' celebrate your party with you. Come on now. Celebration. All celebrate and have a good time. Celebration. We gon' celebrate and have a good time. It's time to come together. It's up to you. What's your pleasure? Everyone around the world, come on! It's a celebration. Please end the meeting.